today for our 7th week of the Strategic Leadership Institute at Southern University. We're excited about this opportunity tonight to have with us again, Dr. John Sibley Butler. Dr. Butler is a professor at the University of Texas at Austin. Dr. Butler is an author, an entrepreneur, a professor, and to some you may not know, he's also a musician as well. So we're definitely excited to have Dr. Butler tonight come back and share with us all about entrepreneurship. It's been just an impactful conversation around how do we get better, how do we improve our entrepreneurship ideas and pursuits. So at this point, let me just kind of lay the land for what Dr. Butler will be covering for us tonight. I also want to add that all of the information that Dr. Butler will be sharing tonight has been uploaded to the Law Center's LMS. So all of the slide decks and handouts have already uploaded. So just go to the LMS on the Law Center and you'll be able to access all of tonight's resources. So first and foremost, at the top of the hour at 6 o'clock, Dr. Butler will be concluding the discussion around entrepreneurship and leadership. If there are any questions that you have, you can place those questions in the chat space and we will visit those questions at some point during tonight's conversation and maybe give you an opportunity to unmute yourself and openly ask that question. Next, we're going to move forward with looking at the core definitions around leadership that we discussed on last week, just even taking those discussions and taking even a deeper dive around those definitions. Specifically looking at the study of leadership and military institutions. And then we'll move forward with tonight. Dr. Butler will introduce to us the military as an ultimate case study in leadership, for example, life and death kinds of decisions as it relates to the military. And then we will turn to leadership, the military and the opportunity structure for Americans within the emphasis on Black American leaders within the military. So we got a full slate that's at the first hour, and at the top of the hour around 7 o'clock, we're going to have a quick rest break and we'll reset, and then we'll come back with Dr. Butler's book, All That We Can Be, Black Leadership, the Army Way. So as you can see, we have a full slate, a full agenda. We're really excited. So without any further ado, we're going to turn it over to Dr. John Sibley Butler to get us started tonight. Dr. Butler.
Hello again. I'm indeed a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Dr. Jackson and Dean Andrews. It's great to be here to continue our discussion about leadership. I think last time we discussed entrepreneurial leadership. And I guess one of my takeaways on that is always to look at the heroes, whether it's a country, whether it's a state, or whether it's a city, and make the entrepreneurs basically heroes. And the whole idea behind that is that opportunities, jobs, tax bases, and et cetera evolve from the whole idea of entrepreneurship and leadership. Another thing we looked at was sort of a case study on. I know what I was saying. Oops.
You can go ahead, Dr. Butler.
Another thing that we looked at was a case study from my book, Entrepreneurship and Self-Help. Among Black Americans. What we want to do is to continue that discussion, and I will conclude that discussion. We got kind of in a hurry last time, but what we did was to put entrepreneurship at the very, very center of community. And we showed that over the years, just using the idea of Black entrepreneurship as a case study, it has been around since the 1700s. And so another thing was that I also have books on An American Story, Mexican American Entrepreneurship and Wealth Creation. So what we find is that entrepreneurial leadership is very, very important. It dovetails with different groups in American society. And the lessons, I think, for Black entrepreneurship has been lost over the years, and among some, not among all. But I think that when we talk about rebuilding communities or the importance of wealth creation, then it goes to innovation and entrepreneurship. And let me just talk some about, to conclude that, about the present state, if you will, of Black entrepreneurship and wealth creation. and what I call in my notes the big divide in America, which I think is the haves and the have-nots, and what that means for society and what that means also for entrepreneurship. So I happen to live in one of the cities with one of the top wealth creators by Black Americans. And as we study this, it's difficult because a lot of the wealth is coming from internet types of enterprises. So if you go back about 10 years, we had all the Black enterprises on Black Enterprise. We had 7 of them that had receipts of over 50 million, and that was a long time ago. So more importantly, when you look at it, it repeats itself today, but in a different kind of way. The enclave that we talked about last time, are the gathering of what Du Bois called the group economy in his economic cooperation among Negroes, has given away where people can live and do whatever they want to do. And so therefore it doesn't take away, however, the importance of innovation, of entrepreneurship. What happens is that people of means, or what I call the bourgeois, if you will, to take a European term, have always reinvented communities. Some people refer to this as the reinvention of communities. Some people refer to this as gentrification of communities. But unfortunately, gentrification has taken a racial tone. I mean, Blacks in Atlanta gentrified their own communities. Gentrification just means people of means. That's all it means. So when people of means get together, then certain things can take place. So I think when it comes to where I sit, for example, in a university and support of universities, you can follow great universities around by looking at how the graduates give back, indeed how the grandkids give back of graduates. So we conclude this by saying that the idea of Black entrepreneurship is really, really booming in America, and it has to share with other Americans in that boom. One of the great things I think in America, as I said earlier, is a split between the haves and the have-nots. I think this is interesting for the entire country. Since our case was on Black America, I think it was interesting for Black America. And we have these discussions. One of the wealthiest Blacks, and as you know, is in Atlanta, is Greg Barranco, who's a Jaguar, and he married his wife went to LSU with me. She was from Shreveport, Juanita Powell. We have these discussions. And the question becomes, well, how do you put entrepreneurship at the very, very center of communities, if you will, to reinvigorate or gentrify different kinds of communities? That is the whole idea of giving back. So I think that what we are faced with, has always been faced with in America, is entrepreneurial leadership, but making entrepreneurs the heroes of communities. I think that political leadership would come and political leadership would go. What makes cities great, what makes communities great, whether they're small shops where people gather to have coffee, or whether they're large firms. Because the person who starts the coffee shop has the same value structure as the person who would start a Dell Computers. And to do that, we must put an emphasis on understanding entrepreneurial leadership, because I think that entrepreneurial leadership is at the core of what the country is about. Now, there'll be competing ways. There are lots of ways to cut it in America, but my notes tell me that if I really went back and looked at all the steps of great communities or great organizations, and how people of means really kicked in, whether it was the Rockefellers in the early days, right? Whether it was the woman who gave all of her entrepreneur activity to Jackson State, or my grandmother who gave hers to Grambling College. She finished from Grambling. I think it's important to understand that kind of relationship. So what we try to say, that there were certain components of entrepreneurship that, of leadership that we evolved. And I took lessons, in things like being brave, not being afraid to run towards your fears. What we want to do now, we're gonna switch the tone. Okay, are there any questions at all about last week that I can answer at all about last week?
You talk about homophily and enclaves,
Yes.
and the importance of these enclaves. What do we lose when we move away from these particular enclaves into the broader society and not able to maintain those enclaves?
And what you have is this: enclaves are very, very difficult to maintain. You can see this. Let me give you some data points. You can see it with early Black Americans, and you can really see it with immigrant groups. Okay, as immigrant groups came to America, maybe because of language, they did not speak the language. They settled in enclaves, or as in the case of Miami, where they couldn't speak the language. What you lose is the structural opportunities, and you lose the whole value structure. Okay, so therefore, if you look at an enclave that still exists today among Black Americans, and there are enclaves that exist today, then you find there is an intergenerational effect from one generation to another. As you move away from that enclave, then you lose that generational effect. But what happens then is that people from different enclaves tend to be together, whether it's work or whether it's communities. What that means is this: it means you're going to lose X, Y, and Z. But if you go work at, I don't know, Microsoft, or if you work at another company, you're very, very similar in backgrounds, despite your ethnic or racial kind of characteristics. So I think that you lose the sense of belonging. You lose protection. So in Min Zhu's work on Chinatown, she says that, well, Chinatown provides a certain amount of protection. You don't have to worry about the whole idea of, in her case, the Chinese of racial treatment, because there is a protection. You find the whole idea of private schooling. You find the idea of preparing yourself for education. So if you look at it, then you're going to lose the enclave notion, but what stays with you is the value structure. So the value structure, you can really see this, for example, among Eastern European Jewish white groups, as they struggle to hang on to their value structure. Now, let me just tell you another enclave effect about that. So if you go to cities, there's a relationship between having a Jewish community organization, right, and success. You go to Black America, there's a relationship between being near a university and success. Okay, so if you look at, so my latest PhD student, Todd Hamilton, I think I mentioned him, his latest book, he went to Xavier in New Orleans. And when we talked about, what if we really do a study and look at proximity to Black institutions and the impact upon families? You can do that also with the Mormons, and you can do it with community groups, with white Jewish groups. And so what happens is that most people are enclave people, and they tend to be the most successful people. Another way to say it is, how do you get grounded? So while the old Black enclaves are not there, the value structure is there. And of course, they gather in ways outside of the enclave, whether they're held together. They might have gone to the same school. They might be in the same organizations. They might be in the same sororities, like AKA. How about that AKA lady, huh? She did all right, huh? Remember, I'm a Kappa. She was a Kappa kitten at Howard. So, right. So my point is, these value structures become very, very interesting, how they're carried through one's life. So one like to keep the values of the enclave, but you're right. You're going to lose this the protection as you move away from the enclave. And let me address homophily. Homophily is just simply people coming together and doing things. And you gotta distinguish homophily from segregation. That's been a big thing in all of my talks. I did the White House Chronicles, which is a PBS show that went to every PBS station in America. And it was difficult for people to understand the difference between segregation and homophily. So homophily is like the Madoff effect in New York, where Madoff, it was a Jewish religion, and there was a lot of trust involved there. but it ended up baiting and switching them in a bad financial kind of investment. So one of the interesting thing about homophily is that it cannot be just homophily. You must have outreach, and the trust factor, you must always, look at the trust factor and see what's going on there. That answer your question, Dean?
Got it. Okay.
Okay, are there any other questions about last week? Well, Dr. Jackson said they wanted me to introduce the whole idea of military leadership, and I have my Bible here, if you can see it here. And I've always had. And let me just talk some about that, and I'll introduce my research, because I do research on organization with an emphasis on military organization. I have a section of my Vita here, and I'm going to go through some of these and talk about it, and what we're going to, because they form the basis of my discussions. Entrepreneurship leadership is very rare. It's difficult for me to teach someone how to be an entrepreneur or to have the it. The question is, how do you have the it? How do you wake up and say, I'm going to change something based on my entrepreneur desires? Okay. Ebony Magazine and Jet Magazine were just bought by two entrepreneurs here in Austin, Texas. They bought all the content. He went to one of the entrepreneurs went to Jackson State, where they got it, and the other person went to the University of Texas, Alfred Jackson. And they bought the entire content because he just had a feeling about maintaining that entrepreneurship. But I've always contended, and from my days in graduate school, when I was doing work on leadership, is that all leadership principles, whether in corporate America, evolved in military institutions. As a matter of fact, I did my dissertation on the mathematics of promotions within the military. So what I want to do is just kind of introduce you to some of my work, what I've been doing the latest, and kind of comment on those as we move through the principles of leadership and all of the activities and what happens for that leadership. Okay, so one of the interesting papers where I combine both leadership and entrepreneurship to make the bridge, I had a graduate student by the name of Ora Sweet. We did a paper on the Israeli model of high-tech entrepreneurship, military capital, and the high-tech industry. Okay? And what was interesting about this paper was that Israel is one of the most creative countries, and it's very, very small. But all of their companies come out of the Israeli military. I'm going to say that again. Like we use universities to create companies, they use the military to create companies. And our question was, what in the world is going on here theoretically that we can learn about military leadership and a combination of military leadership and entrepreneurship? Well, it turns out then, of course, now you got to realize America did this in a similar way because we had a draft at one time. So the Israelis, we get lessons from the following. Military service is required in the Israeli military. It's a very, very small country. So they said, we're going to take those people who are interested in business and put them into leadership classes. It's like an incubator. The military is an incubator. So we look at the value structure of entrepreneurship and how they produce companies like Waves that we utilize and other companies. So one of the things that I'll talk about is what is there about the structure of military organization that allowed the Israelis, and they call it everything from high-tech capital, to create so many companies out of a structure like the military. Okay? So when I refer back to that, it's really about leadership and saying, what can we learn from the Israeli military in terms of creating companies. So look, it's a combination of things. And it really shows how, all militaries are very, very structured. They're hierarchical, right? But it really shows how you use the principles of leadership in the military and then launch the company out of the military to create entrepreneurial teams. Now, the opposite of that is all of the research that's done, which shows that, okay, if someone were in the military and they work in civilian life, they go into a regular company, then they can use their leadership skills that they generated in the military for management principles. But here they're using their leadership skills to literally create companies. The next one is theoretical conditions and the modeling of sexual harassment in the organizations. I did all the mathematical modeling for the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, and the Marines on sexual harassments, perceptions of sexual harassments, and I divided it into different ways and looking at how can you manage. I was very interesting. How can that leadership manage something as dynamic as love? I mean, how do you manage love? Because of its hierarchical nature, the leadership was faced with this, with the following. Look, when men and women like each other, get over it. The federal government is not going to keep them from getting together. Nothing is going to keep them from getting together. But hey, they were in the whole leadership position of saying, there will be no sexual harassment within the context of the military. Okay? And so what we learned from that is how they structured the different companies. And one of the great lessons from that leadership is that the more women were in a unit, the less problem it was. The problem was when there were few women, right? So you had to be, as we talk about, you had to be real savvy about understanding what to do. But the sexual assault, the sexual harassment, it all goes back to military leadership. So when I refer back to this article, I'm going to talk, and it really comes out in all that we can be. I'm going to talk about the structure. I'm going to talk about the leadership classes. And more importantly, I'm going to talk about leadership and how people follow leaders and how they combine the structure to kind of deal with the whole idea of leadership. Now, related to that, I wrote the original paper that became the Don't Ask, Don't Tell that Charles Moskos sent to President Clinton about how do you manage homosexuals in the military, because these issues evolved. And what we learned from that was we generated something called Don't Ask, Don't Tell, and we took it from an officer and a gentleman. That is, in the military, in all of this context, if an officer has an affair, then the officer can be released from the military. But if no one asks and no one tells, they cannot be released. So we took this same kind of situation and put it on sexual orientation, but it was overturned, of course. But it was all based on research. Another one that I'm going to refer to in talking about all of this is private and security contracts, a window to a new profession. And what we did, we looked at who was doing all the work in the military. Now, if you're an officer in the military now, it's very, very interesting, right? And this is where the leadership, it took me, becomes so important. We outsource so much in the military. So a military officer now has not only have to manage and be a leader in traditional military affairs, but we outsource combat, we outsource medical, we outsource all of those things that used to be intrinsic to the military organization. Okay, so we looked at privatization. Okay, now the coup d'etat here was which they still use. I was the chief scientist for the Department of Defense on the study of leadership, cohesion, and values in the military. We did a think tank, and I think it was like in 1975. I was a young scholar right out of graduate school. And what we did, we laid out all of the principles of leadership And let me just say some interesting stuff about that research or that publication and what we tried to do. Well, you know, America wanted to switch from leadership to management. That is, in the academies. So you got the Air Force Academy, you have West Point, you have the Naval Academy, and they said, you know, we can teach management, but we can't teach leadership. Well, it failed miserably. We went right back to the whole idea of leadership within the military, that is allowing leaders to evolve. And so what we learned from that, one of the great lessons that we learned from that is that teaching management is one thing. And one of the principles that we said the first night was that any kind of leadership, you got to see it. You lead by example. You leave your platform and stick your neck out. All right. But certainly that was one of my great publications. The other one, which we're going to lean on in the second part, is my book with Charles Moscas, All That We Can Be, Black Leadership and Racial Integration, The Army Way. That book won 100 awards. I just put the Washington Monthly Book Award, voted the best book for 1977. And we took the whole idea of inequality, that is structural inequality, not worrying about who likes who, not worrying about what people call racism. We asked one question: do you have a paycheck from this organization? Okay. And then we looked at how Black leadership, and let me tell you why this was so important. There was no other organization we could have looked at, no corporate organization that we could have looked at that had as many Black leaders in the organization. You go to corporate America, there's no Black leadership. All right. You go to IBM in those days, no Black leadership at the top. You go to American Airlines, no Black. Exxon, no Black leadership. You go to the military, Black leadership is everywhere. There has always been generals. There has always been lieutenants. Okay? So what we did, we utilized All That We Can Be, and we said that it is a model for the rest of society to emulate. We get into that book has legs, it keeps coming back, but it's very, very different. The other thing, and then we'll stop here pretty soon, is the aspiration of American youth for recruitment. One of the things about, again, military organizations and that leadership that we'll really get into is they'll say this: look, you bring anybody to us as leaders, we can make them a soldier. You just bring me the person and I can make them a soldier. What do you mean you can do that? We fought World War I with immigrants from Italy. We fought the Civil War with ex-slaves. We fought the American Revolution with a ragtag band of people, because leadership in the military is different than saying, what do you bring with you? Give me any person, I can make a helicopter pilot out of it. Give me any person, I can teach them how to fly a jet. Because we have, within the context of the military, and this is a big part of all the stuff on the military, you don't do anything unless you have been trained. So if you are a tank commander, you have gone to tank commander school. If you are a cook, you have gone to cook school. If you are flying helicopters, you have gone to Andrews and you have learned everything that you have learned. So one of the hallmarks of the leadership is that the military would take anybody where they stand and make them soldiers. Whereas corporate America might say, what are the characteristics that you bring to the organization with you? Because what they do is they strip you down from the very, very beginning and build you back in a way that's very, very different. So I learned that from that, and I want to do one more of these articles. And military organization best practice in the status of Black America, in the state of Black America. Okay. One of the things we get into as we begin to look at all of this stuff is that, look, when compared to civilian society, traditionally and now, in terms of leadership positions, there's no comparison. Okay? I'm going to say that again. So when you compare it with civilian society, there are basically no kinds of comparisons. So the question becomes, what is it about the structure of the military? What has happened over the years? And how can the structure of the military, even with its bureaucratic stature, have an impact on the leadership? Now, on the other hand, the military now, I'm going to leave up here, the military now is more like a civilian organization. And why? So let me introduce you now to the military organization and how it has changed and how leadership has changed. And then we're going to relate it to the book, All That We Can Be, but we're really looking at an organization. And I think we have lessons to learn, whether it's universities or wherever within the context of military organization. Because that's some of my background and research in the military. Are there any questions at all? No questions? Okay, good.
No, sir, not at this point.
Well, let's move on. Before to get into these leadership issues in the context of the military, you got to understand what we call the organizational format. And boy, has it changed over the years. Okay? And as a way of thinking about that, I had my major professor, Charles Moskos. We had lots and lots of discussions about organizations and leadership. Because remember, I think that whether it's entrepreneurial or organizational leadership, it's evolving from the military. And I'm going to give you a big change over the years. I'm going to give you two kinds of structures that had a great impact on military leadership. And there are two opposites. They're called the institutional format and the organizational format. Okay? And they both had a great implication on how leaders would manage their leadership within the military. And these are theoretical formats. We'll talk some about the institutional format and then the organizational format. The institutional format of the military and its leadership can be analogous to the priesthood. That is, it is legitimated by leaders with a great service to the organization or service to country, with little remuneration. Everything is taken care of. And this was the format of the military and its leadership from its inception until the 1970s. So the institutional format, let's look at the priesthood, since we were in South Louisiana. You're serving for a much greater good. All housing is developed. Everything is there for you. You simply serve the people. In the early military, you can think about going into the military. You had medical care given by military people. You had commissaries where you bought all of your groceries. It was what we call a total institution. You were drafted into the military, and the leadership were there, and they followed the following principles. We've been trained as leaders, and our job is to defend, if you will, the country. And as I said, these leadership things would be transferred to General Motors and et cetera. And so the leaders had a great, great leeway of determining exactly what people did. There was little deviation in your expectations. I have here in my notes that you wore the clothing. You wore the clothing that you wore, and on your clothing was an insignia of what you were, and you respected the clothing. So that you knew when you met a lieutenant, you saluted. You knew that when you met a general, you knew exactly what the general was. So the leadership there was systematic and major. Well, you know, we can think about corporate America in that same sense. You go study on how it built General Motors. The clothing also had an interesting kind of situation. IBM started with white shirts and tie. And Dean, I'm gonna give you a little Southern University example here about dress and leadership. When I was ninth grade, maybe I was 10th grade, maybe ninth grade, my brother, who was a junior at Southern at the time, he took me to a Southern University basketball game in the old arena. You know what that is, Dean? In the old arena. Well, we had to get there at 2 o'clock. The game between Southern and Grambling didn't start until 7. Grambling had Butterbean, a Bob Love, and Grambling had Willis Reed and those guys from North Louisiana. And everybody was just partying before the game. And Felton Clark walked into the gym in his suit, and you could hear no sound when he hit the door. No sound. Everybody's mouth was shut up. It's as if somebody had turned all the volume off. Well, the idea of clothing that came from the military, the idea of how you dress in leadership will go through American firms, and it will maintain itself, and more importantly, on the institutional format, the military itself did not have to manage the number of people coming in. But then all of a sudden, it all changed. It went from an institutional format to what we have now, an organizational format. Now, I want you to think about the leadership in certain kind of civilian organizations and what it means. So all of a sudden, West Point tried to switch from leadership to management. Why? Well, under the organizational format, people do not serve because of love for country. All things are not provided. It is marketplace standards. All of a sudden, the leadership had to act like IBM. They had to act like Dell Computers. All of a sudden, they had to recruit. All of a sudden, the leadership said, I call it the Wall Street military. I was in a meeting with Milton Friedman in New York when we were discussing switching from the draft to the all-volunteer service and what it meant for military leadership. It meant all of a sudden you got to get on television, got to advertise. Please join the Navy. Please join the Marines. Please join the Army. Not only that, we would give you a comparative pay that's based on pay in civilian life. All of a sudden, we've got to fight wars on a different leadership format. So how do you manage people now when you are recruiting them to join the military? And what did the leaders do? Well, and another thing that happened with the all-volunteer force, we used to have something called WAC, or women soldiers. We had women soldiers, we had the WAC, we had the Air Force, and all of a sudden they became women soldiers because the leadership said, and I was there, the all-volunteer force cannot work without women soldiers. So we had two things going on. You had to recruit and make the all-volunteer force. You have to have a big emphasis on women soldiers. So you all of a sudden you went to a leadership based strictly on orders. Come into the military, drop, understand it's not your job to ask why, just do or die. To a military to say, please come join us. And we must have a change in leadership. So the leadership took more like a Madison Avenue. They hired consulting services, they hired marketing services, they had television ads. Because all of a sudden, in order to defend the country, you had to recruit for people to fight. Well, what was the reaction? What was the reaction of when that happened? And I would give you some examples of that. The first thing that happened, they said, well, how can we replace individuals with technology? How can you replace individuals with technology? Do we really need fighter planes? So all of a sudden it becomes much like combining military leadership with entrepreneurial leadership. What does it mean? If you look at the research, it's like our research on the privatization of the military. We really don't need people flying jet fighters anymore. We have technologies that could fly to your house, knock on your door, and look at you. And if they're looking for John Butler, and blow you away right there without touching anybody else. We have technologies that can follow people in their automobile, right, and selectively take them out. So we have technologies now that are individualized to the source of the military. So the leadership in military organizations changes tremendously. Certainly you've got this combination of the institutional format, but the occupational format is strong. Because there are different kind of outcomes under the institutional format. Well, it's done for a little country, you're expected to do this, you serve for this. On the occupational format is unions, we want a better pay, we should be paid more, and etc. So the following principles would evolve out of military organizations, and then they would be transferred, if you will, to civilian firms, and it would have a tremendous impact on Black opportunity. And I mean on Black opportunity and no other opportunity. Okay? Because Black opportunity was treated different than immigrants when they came to America. So what were the leadership principles? How do we begin to look at from an institution to an occupational format? The first thing, of course, as I have in my notes here, the same principle of send me any person and I can make a soldier out of them. But I have to do it much more in the civilian tradition now. I cannot order them around, right? It becomes more like a college or a university. Because in addition to the fact that I'm recruiting you, I can't recruit you under the occupational format and then treat you like you would be treated under the institutional format. The worst thing I ever went through, perhaps, with the exception of probably graduate school and getting a PhD at Northwestern, was basic training. The utterly disregard for individualism and the utterly disregard for anything that you wish, right? You can't do that under the all-volunteer force because people are volunteering. So basic training was changed. It was changed to reflect more of the organization's commitment to the individual rather than rebuilding the individual so they are committed to the military. Because remember, they're coming down for the pay. And one of the big issues they had when they switched from the draft, the leadership, was the following. Under the institutional format, you had the officers' ranks, you had the enlisted ranks. Nobody in the enlisted ranks were married. When you went into the military, they would say, okay, if we would want you to have a husband or a wife, we would issue you one. Right now, that's not true. So we have families joining the occupational format for the revenue produced by the income. So the first management principle remains: give us anybody, we would treat them in a way so that they can become a soldier. Of course, basic training would change, and you would not be treated in the same way. As a matter of fact, you go in the military, you expect to be treated like crap. But now in the military, if you treat people like crap, it's like working at any other organization because of the occupational format, okay? You can complain. Under the institutional format, refusing to do something was mutiny. You didn't have an opinion. So the leadership then of military organizations, in the words of Charles Moskos, had to gravitate themselves to a more gently form of leadership. And then you had a converging of the great leaders in the military organizations and also the great leaders in civilian organizations, with one caveat. And that is, military organizations are still designed and leaders are still designed for the defense of the country and the possibility of death. So one thing remained the same. In order for leaders to remain leaders, one thing that was carried over from the institutional format was the following. You have to separate the officers' corps from the enlisted ranks. The enlisted rank go from enlisted 1 to enlisted 9. The officers rank from 01 to a 4-star general. Why do you have to do that? Why do you have to do that? Because whether it's the institutional format or the occupational format or the all-volunteer force, you cannot have people who are friends honoring their friends to their death. So no officer can have a relationship with enlisted people. And this was a carryover from the institutional format. Okay? And the third thing that remained within the military organization was the hierarchy structure of the military that goes straight to the President of the United States. Okay? That is, there should be no political affiliation under the old format. It is still, military officers cannot make decisions about the movement of the country. We still have a military under a civilian form of government. No matter how powerful a general, a 4-star general is, he or she can be fired by the President of the United States, because the President is commander-in-chief. And so that hierarchy structure would remain there and would have great implications for the whole idea of equality within the military, especially for Black Americans. So we look at these principles and we look at the research, and let's go back to my research on the Israelis with Ora Swede, who's now a professor at Texas Tech, I might add. We ask, can these things be transferable? I mean, how do you lead an organization that is all voluntary? Okay? What are the structures that you do? What kind of format are we living in the context of organizations such as universities, organizations such as business organizations? And what does that leadership look like? I'm going to take a company done by one of our students here, called Bizarre Voice, Bizzarvoice. Okay. And I would take another company that was done by one of our students called Whole Foods, WHOLEFOODS, that was done by, John Mackey. So when Bizarre Voice was done, the person said, we need to think about the leadership. Shall we go with the traditional or hierarchical structure where we hire people, they come to work, they stay here, or they change it all? And they change it all much like a military leader would do in wartime. Get the job done and don't worry about anything else. Don't worry about saluting and etc. But this is what Bizarre Voice did. Our leadership principle is the following. We don't care where you are. We don't care if you're on vacation. You determine when you take a vacation. Only you can determine that. As long as your numbers and your results are right, that's the only thing that we worry about. The leadership said you don't have to come to work. You can stay at home. You can be out on a boat. It's like a wartime that we take from wartime leadership. You just simply get the job done. Okay? That's in stark contrast to what I call, in my work, the art of Japanese management. Okay? So all of this leadership thing really to me, they all have a military base. Let me talk about Toyota and Mitsubishi, in addition to what I just said about Bizarre Voice. But Toyota and Mitsubishi, they had a basic training. Unlike Bizarre Voice, their leadership said, it's going to be military in nature. There's a book called The Art of Japanese Management. They'll wake up in the morning, they'll report to work, they will sing the song, fight song, or the alma mater, and they will go to work. Very, very military. You wake up in the morning, basic training, work out together, and you go. Well, Toyota did great stuff. Mitsubishi did great stuff. The book on the art of Japanese management really showed the parallels between the military organization and what they were doing. But remember, the Japanese was based on the old style, and Bizarre Voice was based on the new style. Let me talk about recruiting and Whole Foods. And the Rob Webb, who was the CEO when they sold it to Amazon, was speaking to my clients Wednesday. So it's very, very interesting. I'm always looking at parallels, especially when I got to the race stuff, which we get to, and how that have an impact on opportunity structure. So I said, you want to work at Whole Foods? How you select? What's your leadership style? What do you do? Well, we do the following. We take 30 people who apply to Whole Foods, we sit them in a room and we watch them. The people who get up and speak to people and ask people, what's your name? Those are the people that we hire. The people who just sit there, we do not hire them at all. So on the one hand, you keep your mouth shut, you don't get hired. If you get up and interact with people, you get it. You get hired. Well, what do we use to define military leadership or any kind of leadership? The ability to interact with people, the ability to talk with people, the ability to lead people. So whole full reason, how the hell can you lead people when you don't say anything? Okay? You have to have those people, they would say, that's intrinsic. The leadership qualities will become very, very intrinsic to the whole idea that they can become leaders themselves. What about a quiet leader? Well, the military doesn't like quiet leaders necessarily. Go back and read all of the emphasis and the cases on the military where it's life and death. Go back and read the case on Custer, right? And myself, as part of an administration that invaded Iraq, right? The question is, what does life and death have to do with decisions? And here's the big difference in what we learned in both the military and civilian. And again, I'm going to use a case study called Enron. Enron was a company in Houston, Texas. It was voted the best company in the world. They made billions of dollars. They had great leadership from great schools. And they ran it into the ground. They destroyed wealth. The CEO killed himself. They destroyed wealth. People lost all of their savings because it was not leadership based on life and death, but the outcomes were the same for different people. Go back and read the case on Custer, finished from West Point, right? Was deemed a leader because of the interaction thing that we talked about with the Whole Foods, right? Was very, very, look at the leadership stuff, did not really listen very well, right? And finally met his Waterloo on the plains of the West. So these ideas about leadership in the military organization and the structure that you're under really transfer to civilian life. And remember, I think that all organizations, it's a question of leadership. Whatever the organization is doing, it's a question of leadership and the ability to change. Now, the military, my Bible would tell you this. My Bible would tell you this. It is technology that changes the leadership in the context of the military. It would be the dependence on drones. It would be dependent, when 5G gets here, things will be flying around everywhere. So the lessons that we learn by studying the military will have great, great implications. And when we get to leadership, which is, I'm running over, I'm just on time, huh, boss? When we get to leadership and all that we could be and how we provided organizations, structure for Black Americans and produce some of the great Black American leaders in the world, including General Honore that I heard speak here. We're going to look at that. And by the way, it provided the leadership for equal opportunity within civilian society. Okay, now I have a strict direction from Dr. Jackson that he did not want me running over time, and he wanted to give you guys a break. I don't believe in breaks unless you belong to a union, right? That's my leadership style. But he said, Dr. Butler, we got to have a break. Okay, we got a minute. Are there any questions at all as we set up the structure of leadership, bouncing it off of the military and comparing it to civilian structures under the draft military? It was one way. Under the all-volunteer force, it was another way. But again, the results are the same. Any questions at all? Brother Jackson, you ready to take a break?
Yes, sir. But I have a question before we take a break around military leadership. So what if a soldier is not the right fit for the military way of leadership? How do you guys decide if that person continues in that leadership vein or space or is removed from the leadership ranks?
That very seldom happens. And let me tell you why. Because in order to get from point A to point B, you really have to push certain kinds, right, of buttons, okay? That is, you have to go to every school in the world. And what happens, there becomes a ceiling, especially, and we look at a video, especially if you look at Black officers, right? You become a 1-star or 2-star, but a 3-star or 4-star traditionally was hard to get. But under the military kind of situation, you're weeded out as you evolve, right? You're weeded out as you evolve. So therefore, you really hear the term incompetence, if you will, right, among military leaders or military officers in general. Because everybody that's a second lieutenant everybody that's a first lieutenant, everybody that's a captain, everybody that's a major have punched the same clock to get there. Unlike civilian organizations where I could say, well, okay, I'm gonna bring my cousin in, I'm gonna bring, and make this a family business here in the White House. That don't happen in the military, right? So the whole idea of incompetence, right? There's something called an officer and a gentleman. And I was really talking about the officer ranks. Now, our volunteer force, people just stop now. People can just leave. They can leave the military, and they do it in certain kind of ways. They like to do it honorably, but there are ways to get out because you remember you're not drafted anymore. It's an all volunteer force. But that's a good question. I mean, how do you weed out? Well, you weed out the ones, I always say that I'm alive now because of my leadership in Vietnam. And sometimes death takes them out, right? And sometimes other things, but for the most part. But, my former student did all the stuff for women soldiers. He died of cancer, unfortunately. And I went up to see him at about 3 years ago. He was a 4-star general. But making these decisions, you have to lean on the structure and the officers. You got to say, okay, what would Patton have done? What would General Honore have done? So at that level, it almost become a fraternity of decision makers where they lean on each other to make decisions. Yeah.
Okay, great. So basically it's time and seat versus performance or feedback based on that leader's performance.
That's right. I mean, there's no, and we'll talk about that when we get in the next section.
So this is Jeffrey. One just quick question. The way you explain that, Dr. Butler, it's almost like the reason why you will ask what would General Honore do and what would General Patton do, it's almost like a protection for you, right? That's what it sort of insulates you if you do make the wrong decision.
Right, and it's all based on decisions. So, I mean, it's all based on information. What we say, whether it's corporate America or the military, is we didn't have that information. So being an officer means that you have all of the information. And being a leader in an organization means that when you make decisions, you have all of the information. So we live in a situation where we would say, well, the bridge, it fell over the Amid River. And the engineers said, well, we didn't have that information. Or we would say that the plane crashed or the 737 MAX crashed, well, because it had the information. You're exactly right. Leaders have always depended upon information when they make decisions. So why did a commander in chief, why did Roosevelt fire, a major general? Okay, because he would say he had certain kinds of information, but the military leadership, and they're paralyzed. We have to be careful. They're parallels in corporate America. So when you look at the correlation matrix, you have to really, really distinguish between the organization structure. So one is designed for the defense of country, and the other one is designed, right, for profit or nonprofit, right? One is designed to invite people to defend country and give up their life and not draft it, and the other one is designed to help a firm grow. So when you study this stuff, like when we wrote the manual for leadership, we like to take lessons from everywhere, but I like to say that military leadership become almost embedded. It is almost predictable, except, of course, in crisis time. I mean, there's a manual for everything, and you learn, except in crisis time, in times of conflict, it becomes very, very difficult. So I was listening to General Honore. What do you do when the whole city goes underwater? I mean, where is the manual for that? Or what do you do when we have a 9/11? Where is the manual for that? And the chain of command is so systematic, right? And it is, especially now with the communication efforts, it is so systematic. And right now, military leadership has got to manage technologies. It has to manage not only the physical threat, but the threat of the threat of the digital threat. And we know, for example, that, the military was doing email 20 years before we ever saw it. they had a way up, so it's a little bit different. But what I'm saying is a lot of the qualities can be seen in civilian life. But what made the opportunity structure so historic for Black Americans when we wrote All That We Can Be, it relate to a lot of the things that we just talked about. You go to school, you do this. If you are a Tuskegee Airman, you can fly an airplane. If you're a general, you have punched every clock that everybody else has punched, right? Unlike being a leader, perhaps in other organizations where you have not punched the clock, but you're brought in because of other things. So to me, in my research, it's just fascinating. And when I decided to write the book that Charles Moskers and I got, we think that two things. I give you a little commercial here. We think that we solved the race problem. Come on, Ron. Come on. Dr. Jackson, we solved the race problem in All That We Can Be. Because we defined what it is, we defined what it wasn't, and we relied upon the military organization that was unlike any other thing to do it. Okay. But to do that, we had to study the organization and then make big theoretical leaps and look at all the opportunity structure. And we'll talk about that next time. Any other questions at all? What time you want us back, General Jackson? Doctor?
Absolutely. We do have a question from in the chat space, and this is a question, Dr. Butler, and it reads, what role does trust play in a people-centered environment where people are tied to the mission and must bond to people, but how do you address racial and cultural differences in the structure?
Well, first of all, in the military, the purpose is to we're talking about the purpose is to define the country, right? And what we're talking about is that the opportunity structure in the military was a byproduct of the defense of the country, right? It was a byproduct, and women soldiers were the byproduct of that, right? And the old military had no space for differences. Everybody was green. It had no place to say, well, I am this and I am that, and no place for what they call it now, diversity. It was just, look, you are now green. We're going to treat all y'all like crap, right, and get over for it. So I think, read the question again. I think I just answered it, but read it again. With them, how do you do what now?
So that question was from Dr. Pamela Jones. She sent in and chatted in her name. So the question is, what role does trust play in a people-centered environment, right? The role of trust, where people, rally around the organization's mission and are to a certain degree connected. And how do you start to address racial and cultural differences in that structure?
Oh yeah, well, the military is all about team building. It always has been. It's about the trust networks comes in when one learns to trust the organization. All the research that goes back to World War II showed that soldiers fight really not for the defense of the country, but they fight for their fellow soldiers, okay? So I don't know any research to say that the reason why people fought in Vietnam was strictly one reason, which was the mission of the United States. Once the battle starts, it's all about defending the trustworthiness of your fellow person, right? And so when we get into the racial situation, then we'll look at that historically, and how the military was based on, which we're talking about, the contact hypothesis. I'm kind of bleeding over, right? And the contact hypothesis says this, right? Hey, well, I bleed over it. It says, look, when it comes to trust, it was amazing at how whites and non-whites, right, interacted with each other and developed trust based on contact, right? It wasn't based on, teaching people to like you. It wasn't based on taking courses and saying, you've got to be aware of this person. It was based on what you did, right? So we'll get into that next time. That's a good question because that's the core of everything.
We have one more question from Devon, and he has a question. What role do I have to play as a young Black man in becoming a leader?
Get prepared in many situations as you can. Okay. So you got to realize this is what you do. Go back and read the life history of Booker Washington. How did Booker Washington come out of slavery and go to Hampton Institute and produce Tuskegee Institute, that one of the best scientific research universities Alabama has ever seen? Go back and take a look at that. Go back and read the work of, I don't know, some of the great Banneker, right? Who in the 1700s became a leader, right? So there are all kinds of examples, right, in terms of the relationship between race and leadership. But what it has is, all they have in common is they were prepared to do the job, right? And the other thing about is that, what do you want to lead? I mean, do you want to be a political leader? You want to be an entrepreneurial leader? You want to be a leader of an organization? You want to be in the Boys and Girls Club? You want to be a leader of whatever organization? Well, because leadership, you got to interact, you have to be prepared. You're going to meet people. And as you meet people, here's the ultimate experiment. We can get 50 Nobel Prize winners together, put them in a room for 3 days, and a leader will emerge. Why is that? We can get the best politicians in the world together, put them in a room, and a leader will emerge. We can take the best scientists and put them in a room, and a leader will emerge, right? So there's a sameness about leadership, but even in the most interesting leaders that we think of, there's something about the movement of people where they essentially become leaders, right? And so the leadership position means, hey, you get involved in what you do, and you be prepared to what you do. All right. So I am an academician, okay, and I want to choose what I do, right? I've chaired different departments, and for whatever reason, people would say, well, we think that you can do this job and that job. So it's based on experience, it's based on interactions, and a lot of leadership is based on the networking in which you have enmeshed yourself. That is, the theory is that, we all tie together by embedded networks of people as we go through life. Or as the people would say, show me your friends and I'll show me your future, right? Show me the people that you're involved with and I will show you your future. So I think that that's a good question, but you gotta prepare so you're getting kind of certain situations where the leadership will allow you to sort of emerge. Another thing you can do, you start your own company, but a lot of people start their own company, they're horrible leaders and they can't run them for whatever reason.
So Dr. Butler, I want to piggyback on that. So to help young entrepreneurs and leaders be effective, so what is the role, briefly talk about self-awareness, that really is the hallmark of taking ownership of my journey and who I am as a leader, developing as a leader, growing as a leader. So can you briefly just touch on the importance of self-awareness as it evolves into that leadership experience?
Absolutely. You go back and look at when you aware not only of yourself, but I call it a kind of self-assurance, right? And you carry it, and a lot of people have it and a lot of people don't have it. Okay, and I think that the idea of knowing exactly where you are, if you look at business, right, it's okay to be where you are. Some people can be a buccaneer, an entrepreneur, and some people can be a farmer, a non-entrepreneur. Both are fine. The question is knowing where you are. You got to always be honest to yourself and knowing exactly where you are. Now, the whole idea of leadership then is, and that self-awareness is really not realizing where you are in the context of other people. So again, we spend a little time on military leadership. You go to West Point, and they can almost pinpoint the ones, right, who are self-aware, who have a great awareness of themselves, and how they will evolve as they go through their military leaders. Some will evolve and become great generals, and others will not. So it's not only a self-awareness, it's the interaction between self-awareness and the people that you lead. A leader can look into the people that they lead and ask, are you going to follow? And they say yes. There's something about knowledge and know-how and understanding and self-awareness and saying that, hey, you can be and understand where you are. So you gotta combine self-awareness with the experience and just knowing and understanding where you are in the process. All right, go back and look and say, okay, this person was president of his, I don't know, president of his glee club in high school. This person was president of his class in high school. This person was, Miss. Oh, by the way, I got a niece that's running for Miss Southern this year, so I expect for her to win because she's a great leader, right? My that's TJ's grandson, Dean, and granddaughter, Dean. So my point is, you get this awareness of yourself, and as you said, Dr. Jackson, you got to have some kind of self-awareness where you look at yourself and you see yourself, you visualize yourself as a leader. But it's informational based too.
Great. Excellent, Dr. Butler. That sounds great. So I think we're at a breaking point at this time. Why don't we go ahead, folks, and take a quick break, and we'll be back in the Zoom space at about 7:21. So let's take a quick break, rehydrate, whatever that may mean for you. We're going to shift gears, and Dr. Butler will be coming back with us after the break and really open up a conversation around his book, All That We Can Be, Black Leadership, the Army Way. So you don't want to miss that. It's going to be a great experience. So let's take a quick break, and we'll be back in about 6 minutes. Thank you.
Thanks, sir.
So Dr. Butler, you can go ahead and stop sharing at this point.
I will do that. Okay.
All righty.
I guess I need to go get me something to drink too, huh?
Yes, sir. Go ahead and take your quick
hydration
hydration
break.
break.
5 hours. This ought to be 5 hours.
Oh, it should be. The content is there. Absolutely.
Okay.
So will you be sharing? Will you be sharing a deck?
Oh yes, I will.
You can always do a bonus session if you want to.
If you want me to, I will. All right.
Absolutely, Dean. Absolutely, Dean. I'm convinced now, Dean. Yes, sir. It works. It works, Dean.
Woo, okay, I'm gonna give me something. I'll be back. So how we doing?
Okay. I think we're ready to get started back up again. Dr. Butler, you ready to go ahead and start sharing your
I will. Let's make sure we get the right screen, huh?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We hope you guys had a great break, but I think we're going to go ahead and get started back to ensure that we get all of our content in tonight with Dr.
Okay,
Butler.
we got to make sure we might have to do it again because I got so many screens. Let's see if we do it here. We got it?
Yes, sir. It's coming up. Perfect. Just maximize it for us.
Yep. And we tried to do it last time and went to 15 different screens. How we doing there?
Okay, you're good, Dr. Butler. You can go ahead.
Okay, here we go. Back in the day, as they say, and again, this is one of those books that won't die. If military organizations set the stage for leadership, we also say that it set the stage for equal opportunity. I'm gonna say that again. Okay. When we wrote the book, we said, we've solved the race issue, which is the issue of inequality. And my contention is this, kind of where's the paycheck? Okay, that's my contention. So when I started to look at all of this, you do comparisons within organizations, right? I said, I can go back to 1776 and I'm Black, I can get a paycheck from the military. How many firms in America can I get a paycheck from? Okay. So we're going to change, we have always held the organization as a model for opportunities in America for all groups, right? So we say, what are these, what are these leaderships and what can we do? Now, remember that we talked about, you got to remember the basic principles that we talked about the military organization, the hierarchy, the opportunity structure, and etc. Okay. So we go back to the Revolutionary War, and it was a sort of an integrated military. But again, the unmatched history is based on the ability to defend the country. It's not based on some idea that you have to be in the military. It's based on the idea that we need people to defend the country. And the same thing happened with women and the all-volunteer force. So it's the only place in American life where non-Blacks are bossed around by Blacks. And also the opposite, as we shall see when we look at the video. Okay? So what we're saying here is that, look, here's the deal. If we go through all of the early conflicts, I stopped at Vietnam because it's a different military with the technology and et cetera. And this is what we're going to essentially find. We're going to find that, well, all Americans, first of all, could provide opportunities in the context of the military. But the tradition for Black Americans is so different. All right, Revolutionary War, okay. Washington first said Blacks would not be allowed to fight. The British offered Blacks their freedom if they fought. And of course, Blacks fought in the Revolutionary War. First person to die was Christopher Atkins, a Black person in the Revolutionary War. The Civil War, the North pulled up on ex-slaves to complete the war. The Spanish-American War, the same thing, World War I, fought in segregated units. World War II, fought in units. Korea, integrated units. Vietnam, integrated units. So there's the history there, okay? Now, to get us started, Ron, can you share a young John Butler on the on the Jim Lear News Hour in, I don't know what year it was.
Yes, sir. I sure can. Let me, if you stop sharing, and then I'll share my screen.
Okay, I gotta stop sharing. Okay, let me do this. Okay, I'm gonna stop sharing here. Okay, you got it right now.
All righty.
Dean, this is young John Butler here. That we found. Then we'll get into the failure paradigm and where we are and et cetera.
There we go. Now you were unshared. You were still shared. Okay, now we're ready.
Yeah, okay.
Engages Professors Charles Moskos of Northwestern University and John Butler of the University of Texas at Austin. They're the co-authors of All That We Can Be, Black Leadership and Racial Integration, the Army Way.
Gentlemen, welcome. Your new book says that a relentlessly negative picture of Black America forms the premise for most racial discussions in these waning years of the 20th century. But there's one institution that's different, the U.S. Army. How is it different?
It's different in several important ways. It's the only institution in American society where white people are routinely bossed around by Blacks and where Black leadership is very, very evident and well regarded. I mean, obviously, Colin Powell comes to mind, but I might add that 9% of all Army generals today are Black, as are approximately 1/3 of all first sergeants and sergeant majors. It's not utopia by any means. There are problems in the military. It's got racist in it. But in terms of any other institution one wants to compare it with, Black leadership is far and away superior.
So if you're a young white man and enlist in the Army today, you're likely to have a Black superior.
Probably from the first day.
Mm-hmm. And that's a far different Army from what it was. I'm anxious to find out how did it come this far in terms of integrating Blacks and whites and seeing so many Blacks succeed.
Well, first of all, the military has always had a Black presence from the Revolutionary War.
What do you think there, Dean?
The creation of the military that really predated Brown versus Board of Education. So originally you had a pool of people there to choose from. You couple that with the president being at the apex or commander-in-chief to give an order to desegregate. Then it becoming interestingly clear that it would happen almost overnight. In addition to that, the military has developed the whole idea that if you bring me a person, whoever it is, then I will make a soldier out of them. So it's a combination of the organization structure, the historical participation of Blacks in the military, and the willingness to say, we will essentially do this. And of course, the purpose of the military is to defend the country. We must say that. And excellent race relations is a byproduct of that overall mission.
But the Army also seems to make some very self-conscious decisions about how it will deal with the questions of affirmative action that bedevil so much of society. Can you tell us more about those?
It's really based on increasing the quality and qualification of the pool that's to be promoted. For example, if 10% of the lieutenants in the Army are Black, then the goal for the next promotion level, which happens to be captain, would also be 10%. The figure is not based on some population numbers in the general society or the total number of Blacks in the system, but on the pool that's qualified. We argue very strongly that's the sort of the key, and we do think it has lessons for civilian society. The key is don't focus on white racism, which tends to be a kind of default for a lot of liberals, but rather focus on improving and increasing Black opportunity channels. And the Army has a series of programs like that, ranging from recruits to enter the military to lower ranking enlisted persons to become sergeants, from historically Black colleges to produce officers who are to be commissioned. Over half of the officers in the American Army today, by the way, are products of historically Black institutions. And there's another program, a so-called prep school, that raises young men and women to be able to enter West Point, one of the most selective of all schools in this country.
So they make an energetic effort to increase the pool of people who will be qualified both by reaching out and by training them so that they can meet the standards.
Right. Of course, the entire emphasis is on people who can do the job. And we call that, of course, the whole idea of supply side affirmative action versus demand side affirmative action. And the historical Black schools have played, as Charlie noted, played an important role in that. So you don't see one walking around in the military and they say, that's an affirmative action officer, and that is an affirmative action general. I think the whole idea is that the relationship between standards and promotion and quality has been essentially maintained through bringing from the pool.
But John Butler, you make the point in your book that they've made a very strong effort not to do what many universities do. You teach the University of Texas. Many other universities lower their standards in order to bring more minorities in. And your argument is they don't lower the standards in the Army. Everybody has to get over the same bar, but they train them up to get over the bar.
That's right, from those pools. And of course, by concentrating on the focus, which is not only the defense of the country, but opportunities. Mm-hmm. One of the problems with many universities is that they concentrate on things like multiculturalism. Mm-hmm. Multiculturalism does not relate to opportunity. It's something that churches should do and religious institutions should do in looking at it overall. But the military concentrates on opportunities. So I would rather have 40,000 screaming white racists and 10,000 Black students than 48,000 white students and 400 Black students taking multicultural courses.
Right. But it's also true that one argument that comes from the left is the best way to get this done in society is to lower the bar and set special standards. You're saying they don't do that in multicultural. The other argument comes from the right, and that is to be racially blind. Don't pay. Let's just take it each individually. Don't pay attention to race. And you're saying they don't do that either.
Both. We call it not race blind, but race savvy. Mm-hmm. Lowering the bar only buys short-term gains and results in long-term disaffection. The Army took a lot of heat by not lowering the bar with racial problems in the late 70s and early 80s. But by not lowering the bar, everybody who does make it through the system is recognized as a qualified person. Now, on the other side, about being race blind, that sounds nice in theory, but in practice, you have to be race savvy. If you have a white first sergeant and a Black company commander, that's okay. But if you have two whites or two Blacks, you have to move people around. If a unit or a squad gets to be predominantly one color, it's going to take some adjustments. That's what we mean by race savvy. You cannot ignore it.
Bottom line, do you think this is a successful approach to race relations?
We do think it's a successful approach to race relations. Obviously, there are different qualities of an Army structure compared to most civilian structures, but there are some lessons that can easily be transferred.
Such as?
Well, one of the important lessons is that we know that as you increase the Black proportion in an organization like the Army, it can also increase the effectiveness of the organization. This runs against, I think, most civilian stereotypes. I think another lesson we'd also like to draw is that being a Black and being an American are one and the same. These are not contradictory essences.
As a matter of fact, we call this Afro-Anglo culture.
Afro-Anglo culture.
And the whole idea is to pierce the ball, if you will, in the tribalism that is developing in America. And that whites are, by definition, part Black culturally, and Blacks are, by definition, part white culturally. And the whole idea is to look at the shared things in terms of the movement of the country.
And you believe the Army has done that more successfully?
I think the Army has done that because it has the numbers to do it. If you look in the book, what white soldiers would say is that, yes, we're in the service and being part Black in the service is fine. Mm-hmm. I mean, they recognize the change in culture, everything from the music that you hear, and it becomes pretty interesting.
We think that if all Americans can realize that the Afro-American part of our culture is part of our core, we think we would Lancelot of the boil. And for a lot of Blacks at the same time to realize they are part of our mainstream.
Brief question, but a very important one. If the Army has been this successful on race relations, why is it having so much trouble with regard to women in the military?
Well, I think that the gender issue is a different kind of issue. I don't think, first of all, that you can draw parallels from the race issue to the gender issue. I think when you say trouble, it is not trouble of opportunities. It is a trouble in terms of what people do and how people act. Now, in our book, we say that you concentrate on Black opportunity and forget about racism. I don't think you can say that in the gender effects, because with gender, you have these subordinate sexual kind of things that's going on. So I think that solving that problem will be, you've got to recognize a different paradigm. Mm-hmm. It's got to be seen in its own historical light. And let us also remember that 50%, almost 50% of women in the military are Black. Although when women are presented in the military, it's mostly a female white face. Mm-hmm. So we're talking about opportunities for women in general.
Close on one personal note. You're both draftees. You say you're both proud to have served in the Army. One interesting difference is one of you is an affirmative action baby and the other one isn't.
And it's not the black one. I am the recipient of beneficiary of affirmative action because I was admitted to Princeton University in the middle 1950s because they wanted somebody from New Mexico. I'm also the first in my family to finish secondary school. And I had John Butler.
I'm a fourth generation college graduate. I was expected to go to school.
That's pretty good, Dean. Huh?
Down State University, and my parents paid my way throughout my education experiences.
And integrated at LSU as well.
I'm one of the first undergraduates.
So much for racial stereotypes.
Thank you both, John Butler and Charlie Osborne.
All right, what do you guys think? What do you guys think? What do you think? All right, Dean.
Well, I think it's very important when you talk about affirmative action on the supply side.
Yeah.
That's always been my point of view, is that basically people can rise to the level of achieving what they have to. And the military basically says, look, we're going to do this. We don't care how much time it's going to take. If you want to be a captain, you got to get to that particular bar. It may take you a little longer. You come in with some deficiencies, but we're going to get you there.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
Exactly right. So are we going to, okay, so are there any questions about the video? First of all, that was a very young John Sibley Butler.
Looks like you had less hair then, John. I don't know.
Well, this pandemic, I tell you, it's getting big, isn't it? You're right. All right, so we're gonna go here.
General Butler, I'm sorry I didn't want to intervene and hold you too long, but I did want to. I just want to speak to the fact that I'm feel extremely blessed to be under your leadership for the last 2 days. And given the fact that I have a lot of military people in my family, it's just amazing to hear your mindset, and it helps me to understand some things about them. And also I can see that how military leadership can be, would be beneficial to be integrated into the society. However, how can we accomplish this successfully, given that, as you spoke about last week, about the this being third and fourth generational society that has veered away from entrepreneurship and mindset of entrepreneurship? How can we?
Yes, I got you. How can we do that? Well, look, here's the deal. When we did the book, we show, for example, that Black military families, their SATs were higher than any other families, black or white. They had traveled the world. They've been in Germany. They've been around the globe. And you look at the lessons from military. So, of course, I'm in Texas. We have lots of military bases here. And our most successful students also came from military families. As a matter of fact, what I say in the book is that military families have replaced the old Southern bourgeoisie in a lot of ways in developing great kinds of individuals. So what you do that is like any other thing. We're gonna talk about different kind of paradigms, and you got to be careful who you make your heroes. As simple as that. So when you go through these time periods and you say, what are the lessons that we learn? Well, these lessons have to be lessons for communities also. And that's why it's so important to take paradigms when we study these different kinds of organizations, right? And we study military organizations and we look at military families. Even today, you look at intergenerational military families. You look at people who came out of military families. If you look at Black individuals who came out of military families, it's just a different kind of value structure, and the data shows that. Again, it's a structure of opportunities. It's a structure of concentrating on opportunities, and I think that we get that from military leadership. Now, when I was growing up in Southern Louisiana, we always had somebody in the community that we called the colonel, right? We called the colonel. Oh, I guess I should share, Doctor? Get back to the
Yes,
thing.
sir. Yes, sir. You can go ahead and share your screen.
Okay, so I think that, let's do this. You got me there? Let me see here. As I answer the question, right? We don't lose too much time. Okay. Am I there now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. So I think that, remember, when we study leadership, right? That's good, right?
Yes, sir.
When we study leadership, right, we have to really look at what has worked and what has not worked, right? We have to look at. And we just haven't done that. The whole society has not done that. And the reason we haven't done that, because we switched in about the late 1960s to the failure paradigm. Okay. And I'm gonna tell you what that is. Okay. The failure paradigm. Well, did that answer your question? By the way, and I hope we can do this, right? The failure paradigm moves away from people solving problems to what they can do to what they can't do. Okay? So my book on entrepreneurship is about how do you solve problems, right? How do you solve problems? Well, you solve problems by going back to how in the world do you solve the problem, right? So if you have a problem, then you move away from the failure paradigm and you move to a paradigm that will work. In this case, what we're talking about is military leadership, okay? But the failure paradigm to not give us consideration to Black success. It's a break from that strong tradition of success. It cannot inform best practices. And it's grounded in faulty theoretical ideas because of racial classifications of whites, okay? So there's a concentration. People forget about the opportunity structure, right? The opportunity structure. And then they become concerned with things that have absolutely no impact on their opportunity, okay? So what we did is, look, how do you get away from this? Here are the lessons from the book. Okay, let me go back here. So we, in the study, we're looking at leadership, okay? And what we said was, hey, we can't study leadership at major firms because there are no leaders. So even in the 1940s, there were Black generals, right? There were Black lieutenants, right? Even in the segregated military, the Tuskegee Airmen, right? So what happens then, so what's the lessons of all of this? Because remember, in business or in leadership, you have to look for lessons, okay? So we say, okay, what's the lesson for this leadership? What can we say, okay? So we look at the military and we say we solved it. And of course, our emphasis was on the Black-white situation. And by the way, I don't know what's going on now with race, Dean. Everybody is, I don't know, they got people of color, genre de color, and I know there's a difference between people of color and colored people. So y'all keep that in mind as y'all go forward. The bathroom didn't say people of color, it said colored people. And je parle beaucoup le français, and genre de color to me, people of color is a whole different things. Okay. So we're talking about traditional Blacks and whites. That is, if you're Black, you got a drop of Black blood in you, and that makes you Black, right? I like to tell the story, Dean. When I was at LSU, we used to have meetings so we can figure out who was Black and who was white, because right, we had so many Creoles in Louisiana. Okay, so we said these people will not see the racist situation in order to succeed. They're going to view it the same way. And so what we're trying to say, one lesson is forget about the fact that you do not see things in the same kind of way. Okay. All right. The next big lesson is, look, this is a big one. I hear people say, when you stop and concentrate on an ism, you're just dead because you can't solve that ism. Okay. So it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense to me when I was in college and debating David Duke, who was a Klansman, president of Ku Klux Klan, president of White Citizen Council. I didn't care what he was, okay? Not my job to change it. I didn't have any emphasis on him, right? And so why are you going to concentrate? You got to concentrate on opportunity, okay? So when I look at all of these, the lessons from the military, right? And what they have done, they didn't concentrate on the historic racism or exclusion. They switched to opportunity. How else can you show the number of Blacks and high ranks that they're really concentrated on doing? Okay, so you're not going to see things in the same way, right? And as bad as racism is, if you wait till it's over, you won't do anything. And that's really a lesson. It's a lesson for today. It's just a lesson we get from the military, right? But the organization has to be just rootless about discrimination. just flat out rootless about discrimination. Okay. That is, now get what we're saying here. Okay. You can have a lot of sexism and racism, but you can't discriminate, right? So you can be an organization, right? But you have an opportunity, and that's what you concentrate on. Otherwise, you're dead in the water, right? So I don't believe in telling my students you should go take a multicultural course to learn to like me. That doesn't get anything. It's based on your experience with people who you interacted with. You know, all of my friends from college, from my undergraduate days, we travel together. We go to games together. It was based on the fact that we did stuff in college, right? And nobody is gonna, give me a class and say, you have to like this, whatever have you, right? So you're rootless on discrimination, all right? And so the military said there would be no kind of discrimination. Now, Dr. Jackson, I'm moving right along. And we talked about this, right? And what we said was, if we attached it to what we call the qualified pool of both races. And we put both races there. And the reason why I think that the Black educational was that the Black officers were much better qualified educational than the whites. That's what I always said when you look at the data. And the question becomes, so you put the qualified pool there to do away from the networking, okay? So if, again, whatever you are, you've been to school, okay? You've been to school to basically learn wherever you are. And remember, this requires exceptional leadership. It requires exceptional leadership to do this. But remember, the emphasis is on paychecks. It's on numbers, right? It's not on the fact that you've got to do this and you got to love. Let me tell you, I'm on the foundation board at my alma mater. I got so tired of Tom saying, we got to have, people liking each other. This is not church. People will learn to like each other. You got to have the organization, right? You just have to have the organization. That's lesson 4, okay? And lesson 5 is that, of course, a level playing field is just not always enough. And the reason for that is when you're locked out so long of the networking, then it becomes very, very difficult, right? That is, you must do something to get people in the context of where they are today, okay, or where they're going today. Now, let's back up. Can you imagine a leader, right? A leader coming out and saying, I really don't care about the racism, but I care about the discrimination. Can you imagine that today? But that takes a great leader to come out and say, all right, so racism is here, let's concentrate on, be ruthless about discrimination and opportunities. So all of the resources get to ending or eradicating something, right, that has no structure at all on your opportunity. And this is when we go to the immigrants, right? So the immigrants come to America, for example, and see lots of opportunities, but it's hard for Americans to see opportunities, right? So again, I work with immigrant, especially, Nigerian and the entrepreneurs. And of course, they have a whole emphasis. The emphasis is so much on opportunities, as opposed to paying attention to racism, which is, I think today has really engulfed a strategy that's going nowhere, right? Because you have to be ruthless about discrimination, right? And you have to do that. Okay. And this is a good one, which the data has shown, right? It's just, for the military, it's just good for the organization, okay? And for most business organizations, it's just been good, because good people are good people. So we got
Dr. Butler?
Yes, question.
Just a question. I think a lot of us, at least, I think of racism as discrimination, as almost one and the same. And I guess you're making a distinction.
Oh, yeah.
But I'm not quite sure what is the distinction, because it's the racism that stops you from moving up or even having those opportunities. It's the racism that stops the networking so you can move up. So I'm not quite sure if I understand your distinction.
But I think you can have a racist organization that's full of Black Americans. So I think people can be, I think if you look, you go back and read my book on entrepreneurship and self-help, the whole idea of some of the more attitudes does not always reflect behavior, okay? So this is what happens, right? If people wait until the racism is eradicated, where are you going, right? So by concentrating on racism, well, you deconcentrate on what you should do. Now, if we had waited until the racism was gone, it changed structurally, right? I'm not sure that all of the attitudes changed. But what changed was discrimination, okay? That is, nobody waited until this ism or whatever it is here, the ism was changed. So I think someone can be very, very racist, but act in a non-discrimination way, right? Because of the goals of the organization, right? So there's a great book in what we say and what we do, okay? So I make a big distinction on attitudes, which is racism, and discrimination, okay? A big difference go back between attitudes and discrimination. So what we say in the book is this, okay? Or let me give you another thing. If coming out of slavery, you had waited to the end of racism, you would have no organizations and no modes of success. So why is it that Blacks as a group made most of its strides under legal segregation? Well, one thing is they took racism as a given, okay? Right, so let's forget about Black Americans and let's look at European Americans, okay? And I want you to write this down, because the groups in the world that had the most isms and did the interesting thing about opportunity are better off today, okay? So I can give an example of white Mormons whose churches were burned down from Chicago and put them all the way on the West Coast. They developed an organization called BYU because the anti-Mormonism was so strong because they believed in having multiple wives. I can tell you about Eastern European Jews and the anti-Semitism in America, right? They never stopped to worry about the anti-Semitism, but put the emphasis on opportunities, right? As a white group, they've been slapped around, killed. Hitler tried to kill them all, and they developed this process. Well, you can kill us all, but you can't take the opportunity structure. Now, they believe that education and business travel. They kicked out of so much stuff. So go to Black Americans. For those Black Americans who stopped to worry about racism, they're way behind those people who said, okay, let's keep going. So I think there's a difference between, you can't say, as formula as racism is, if you wait, and I don't know how you're going to measure that it's all gone, okay? And I think what I do is define it in terms of opportunity structure, okay? So when I say to a person, well, you know, what's going on with the Ku Klux Klan? And I say, you know, I would love to have a contract to make the sheets because the markup is so good on them. What does that mean? Okay, I'll give you another example. I got a call back in 1980. I got a good friend. He was one of the first Black to play at Ole Miss. And he said, hey, won't you come up here to this LSU Ole Miss game? I said, Ben, I'm not going to come up there and sit in all them rebel flags. He said, hey, man, you know, I got the contract to bring them in. Now, that's a true story, right? something is going on there when it comes to all of the isms when you go across. So what we said in the military was this, right? You don't concentrate on this, you concentrate on that. Because if you concentrate on this, you're going to spend all your time trying to change other people and you go nowhere.
Right? So you're saying that racism is just an attitude and it's not an action. Right. And so I would say to you that I want the contract to the Klans to do the sheets too, but the person who's going to make the call is probably going to say, I don't want a Black man doing our sheets and making the markup. I want some other person.
Well, you know
our
what?
sheets and that's the racism or the attitude that comes in that stops me from getting the contract.
Yeah, what I'm saying is that if that's why you concentrate on opportunity and your root is about discrimination, since you bring in contracts. Now, I won't complain about the fact that they won't give me the contract, right? That's an attitude. But, you know, I have to get very, very interesting. Maybe I have one of my white friends that make the call for me, you know. That's no problem. But the emphasis is this, right? When you worry about this, let's take universities, right? Take the University of Texas. Oh, we're going to have all these classes to teach you how to like people. Well, I don't need all those classes. I said, you know, I don't want all those classes. You just increase the numbers and they'll let it take care of itself. Because what we do know is interaction rather than all of these, you got to take this course, you got to have this training. That doesn't do anything. I got to be trained when I go to LSU that they got to love the history of the Confederacy. Well, that's not going to work. It just ain't going to work on me. I'm just not interested in that, right? So my point is that what we said in the book was, you look at the data, you look at the military in the midst of all of this, they got lots of opportunities. They got blacks up and down the ranks. Nobody's done this in civilian society. There's a lot of discrimination. I mean, there's a lot of racism, but they concentrated on eradicating discrimination, not racism, discrimination. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense to you?
I hear what you're saying. I'm not quite sure if I fully agree, but I hear what you're saying. Yeah. I guess I've worked in some very large corporations, and they talk about how we're not going to discriminate, but the racism feeds into the discrimination because some blacks, we just don't move up for whatever reason. There's some subjective things going on.
Oh yeah. It doesn't mean there's going to be no discrimination, but you got to be rootless. All right, rootless means you can file a lawsuit. That's what that means.
Dr. Butler, this is Brian Dixon. If I might, I've been in the military after your book and such, but I'll say one thing about ruthless about discrimination. You look at our promotion system. We intentionally built it to inhibit people's preconceived notions from influencing their decision making. So I've sat on multiple selection boards for officers, and when you're in that process, you're going after discriminators of performance, and you get very little information that tells you the people's background, if they're married. You just don't know it. So if you were wanting to choose on that, you don't have that information, and you're so busy with the process, you're just forced to go out, for me, what the Navy wants us to pick. And I think that process, so if there was a noticeably racist person, I just don't even understand how they would exercise their racism, because the structure inhibits it, because we don't allow discrimination in that process. And if we detect that we have it, we change the process to remove it from the system. So that's my experience.
And that's being rootless. That is, what you're doing is you're taking away the familiarity. If you look at all that promotion process, because we still have to explain how in even the all volunteer force and also the the non-volunteer force, the draft era, why there are so many opportunities. All right, and now one of it has to do with the structure, right? That is, when you look at military organization, and I was approached by Clay Johnson to be Secretary of the Army with the Bush administration, and when you look at that, you say, well, okay, show me not the emphasis on racism, show me the opportunity structure. I want to know how many opportunities do you have here getting a paycheck. I'm not interested if somebody likes you or not. And what we said was that the military had done a good job, not necessarily on ending racism, but by providing opportunities. Now, and so if they can exist in the same way, but the idea is that the lesson is focus on opportunity. That's what we said. That's what we learned, right? All right, let me get through these here, because the good doctor's gonna cut me off here after a while, all right? And you heard us talk about quality of both races. Now, the interesting stuff, right, was when the gender was mentioned, right? And if you look at the whole idea of gender in the military, was switched to, soldiers. They were called women soldiers, right? And you can make some of the same arguments. I mean, in the military, I had a student here. I was faculty director for ROTC at Texas for 6 years, right? And I had a student who was a Marine pilot. She flew an airplane into an aircraft carrier, right? But the whole idea is the same. You know, if you're gonna run a country, you bring me the person and you provide opportunities for them, and you link the standards to the qualified pool, in this case of both races. And I think Charlie Moskos talked about that some. Okay, all right. We got that one here, okay. And we got, what's the other? We talked about that one. Okay. Now remember, we all participate in organizations to an end, okay? If you start an enterprise, you need great people, okay? You just need great people. So the lesson 7 that we said was, here's the deal. We understand that from its very, very inception, right? The military job is to defend the country. And because of the organization structure and the leadership, they can do it with lots of people, from immigrants who can't speak the language, right, to ex-slaves who moved into the Union forces, right? And that's a lesson, okay? It's a byproduct to do that, and that it should be the end of those slides. Okay, so what do we have here? What do we have here going on in terms of when we said that we kind of solve the race problem? And what we think is that when we look at all the data and we look at the opportunity structures, right? So great leaders, right, have to say the following. And again, I think it's a lesson from the military, okay? All individuals can make a contribution to the organization. And my leadership will make sure, right, that contribution is recognized. Okay? In the context of the opportunity structure, right? Here we're talking about race in the context of that organization structure. What we said is that the military itself created a certain kind of structure that allowed for the opportunity for Black America that didn't happen in the civilian life. As a matter of fact, the civilian life is just trying to catch up now, okay? And we measure that not by attitudes, but by structure, okay? And that structure asks one question. The opportunity is measured by the numbers that you have, a lesson that universities is hard for universities to learn, right? And not worrying about things that really do not make a difference. What makes a difference is providing opportunities to everyone, all right? So when I sit on board meetings at LSU and they tell me that we're gonna do X, Y, Z, I just ask one question, what's the percentages? I wanna know the percentage of faculty you have. I wanna know the percentage of students that you have. And I wanna know how they're interacting with each other. Because, you know, students will interact with each other, where they, you know, play tennis together, play volleyball together, or do whatever have you. I want to know the opportunity. I'm not interested in what people think about you. I want to know, like in the military, okay, how many first sergeants do you have? Which we participated, you know, in the book. How many lieutenants do you have? That's all I want to know. If you can't show me that there's opportunities, well, I'm not interested. Right? I'm just not interested in that. Okay, so I think that we get, and here again, we're talking about leadership, and we're talking about a certain kind of structure. So what we argue and all that we can be, which by the way, they still use the book at Columbia, is that the leadership was so strong, right? Coming from the commander-in-chief in the 1940s. And then the lesson picked up through the 60s, 70s, in all kinds of situations. And remember, we had all kinds of racial situations in the military, right? We went through the 1960s, we went through all of those, we went through the draft dodges, we went through all of that, but the emphasis was always basically on opportunities, okay? All right, so that's all that we could be, because, you know, I wrote the book, I can go on and on. Any questions at all?
Dr. Butler, are you saying or suggesting that eradicating racism doesn't make a difference at all?
I'm saying you will never eradicate racism. That's what I'm saying. Why should I spend my time? Tell me, what's your plan to eradicate racism? What are you going to do?
I don't know that there's a specific plan, but I do think that educating individuals can be a first step.
Well, I think that you can do that, but I'm not interested in doing that. I'm interested in opportunities. All right. So my deal is, as I said to people in college, you go do that. I don't have time to do that. I've got time to make sure that the opportunities that I'm seeking, right, that I prepare myself to seek those opportunities, right? I cannot stop and worry about that whole issue. I have to stop and worry about the opportunity structure. Well, when you concentrate on the opportunity structure, then there's no relationship between the movement of opportunities and the end of any kind of ism. Okay? I have a lot with white females. I mean, you're not going to eradicate sexism, right? What they call sex, it's just not going to happen. But what you can do is concentrate on the opportunity structure. That is your focus, okay? So I would rather have all of the emphasis on recruitment, in this case of Black Americans in the Microsoft, than having courses on Black Americans where there are no Black Americans about diversity and inclusion. So I go to organizations, Dean, they got one Black in it and they're talking about issues on diversity and inclusion. What the hell does that mean? I just want to know. What? I mean, the probability of you seeing one in your company, they got all of this thing that's going, I just, what does it mean? Okay. And then, of course, all right, what we did in the military was this, okay? We said, this is an opportunity structure, and the opportunity structure is not based on any kind of ism. Again, I have all kind of trouble with my alma mater, LSU. So I say to the president, well, if you're going to talk about inclusion, I want the football team in LSU to represent the student body. I think we're about 12% Black, so we should 12 football players on that team. You're going to go that route. If you're going to talk about equal opportunity, it doesn't matter about the structure, right? Because it's based on opportunity or the opportunity pool. So you want to go that route? Okay, we'll go that route. Okay. I want my football team, my alma mater, to have a representative of white students on the football team, or white players on the football team. Okay. So that when I look at it, I can say, boy, we have diversity and inclusion on the football team. Okay. It's just like me saying, and people at the University of Texas, we hooded 60 PhDs in engineering at the University of Texas. I don't know, it was 3 years ago. Not one American was there. Not one. Okay. Not one American was there. Well, that's because of the availability of the pool. So when I look at our women's golf team at the University of Texas, and I see all of the foreign students and no American players, or when I look at the hockey team at Harvard University and they're all from Canada, that's about equal opportunity. That's not about diversity and inclusion. So if you concentrate on equal opportunity, you get one outcome, which is the military. Okay, if you can do the job, you do the job, don't care who you are. If you concentrate on just diversity and inclusion, well, I want everything in your organization to provide the diversity. You can't have it both ways. So I think it's two models that take you in two different kinds of ways. One is about the opportunity structure, and I really don't care what you think about me. Okay, I really don't care. As long as I have the opportunity to work in the organization. But we said nobody did that better than the military. Now, what happened as a result of that, there are so many great military families, right, that have come out of the military and go into, it's Colin Powell and other people who go into great organization in the civilian society, right? Because the whole idea is that within the context of the military, the learning curve of leadership is high. So everybody wants people who have been in the military for leaders. Yeah, so I'm saying that the data would say this, right? That the big lesson is you got to get yourself together, right? You have to get yourself together. And that's at the individual level. That's what we've been talking about. That includes America, right? That includes all kinds of things. You cannot worry about who likes America, right? You got to get yourself together. You cannot worry about who are racist. You got to get yourself together. If there's discrimination, you have to be really, really hard on discrimination, you know. And I think when that happens, then what it does, when I say hard on discrimination, it means right now, if Dean Andrews went to New York City and had $1 billion in his pocket and tried to buy a house in the most prestigious place in Manhattan, they couldn't do nothing with it. Because he'll sue the hell out of them. And they said, you can't live here. It's there, right?
So Dr. Butler, I have a question for you. There's a question in the chat before you move forward with that around from my colleague, John Miles. And he asked a question tonight: how can Southern University create opportunity channels for its students in corporate America and the entrepreneurial space?
Well, I think Southern University is doing a good job. And look, here's the deal. Now, you got great graduates, right? I know you got graduates, you know. You have Dexter Henderson, who's a Southern University grad, loves his university, right? I told you, I mean, and that's what he does. I mean, the networking is very, very great. Now, I don't know the statistics, Dean. What's your placement statistics, Dean? I can call Dexter and get him online.
Okay, what I want to say, John, is that basically if you read Malcolm Gladwell, he talks about the 10,000 hour rule. If you want to be competent in anything, you've got to put the time in, you've got to put the dedication in. So the opportunity is there.
Right.
In other words, I've got, companies, especially over the last year, that are crying out for talent.
Right.
This year, the challenge I give them, they say, well, you don't have enough. I say, well, look, you got to help me create them. You can't tell me they're not there. In other words, I'm in the business of creating talent. So make an investment in my institution so I can go out and find these individuals and make them, as the Army has done, to show you how more or less to build these people to be productive. That's the issue. It's on the supply side.
Right. I got Dexter Henderson here, a great Southern University grad. Say hello to Dexter. Head of IBM Austin, which is the most prestigious unit of IBM. And I got a question, Dexter. How do you get more? Oh, this is my class on leadership at Southern University. Say hello.
Hello.
Hello, Dexter.
How you doing over there? This is Don Andrews in the business school.
Dr. Anderson, how you doing, sir?
All right.
I tell you what you're doing, you're making me write checks to Southern University. That's what it makes me do. So Dexter, the question was, what do you do? Dexter has done a lot with engineering. I had a question about what do you do to make sure that opportunity is structured for graduates of Southern going into corporate America? What do you guys do?
Well, recently we just held classes for the instructors to educate them on blockchain and cloud computing and a whole lot of new technologies that are going to be leading the industry and what people are focused on.
Sounds like the military to me.
Got the IBM Skills Academy. Have I had several of my professors in that program?
Yeah, correct. So Dr. Anderson is right. So it was to help the business school, the engineering school, and the computer science school to make them aware of the technologies that we're going to face going forward. So being able to include that in your curriculum, being able to include that in the way you teach is going to help our students be better prepared for when they come into corporate America.
Okay, so thank you, sir. You got it right from the horse's mouth. I had to get a Southern grad on here. So Dexter, I'll holler at you. Oh, by the way, they just canceled the LSU Alabama game, so I won't be going home. I'll holler at you. Too much COVID. Okay, take care. All right, bye-bye. Now here's a guy who finished from Southern, and he has spent his whole career trying to answer that question. And his answer was very, very instructive. He did exactly what the military did. What did he do? He said, what we're doing is we're developing classes, right, to better prepare people to compete. Okay. So I think that, Dean Andrews, what's your placement coming out of
In Fortune 500s, in other words, my placement rate is about 70%, but for corporate America, it's about 25%.
Okay, right. So the TOLA doesn't matter. The TOLA is a what, 92% placement?
Yeah.
Yeah, right. So I think that's going on at Southern University, and I think. But let's go back to the lessons of the military and relate to what Dexter Henderson just said. Dexter said, okay, so they go to schools, right? And they say the following. And they also come to University of Texas and they say the following, right? To better prepare you to compete in the future, you need to do X, Y, and Z. So for example, we have gone a lot away from, well, we still have an MBA program at Texas, but now we have a Master of Finance, right? That Master of Finance, the placement is just off the scale. Actually, it's a Master of Statistics, right, related to finance, but we could call it statistics. Nobody would take it, right? So we have to continually to switch to train, but I think the placement of Southern is doing pretty well for ex-students. I think that's what I think. That's what I think. Okay, any other questions here at all?
So basically, Dr. Butler, we see a lot of upskilling and reskilling in order to meet the demands that corporate America is seeking and asking for, and that there is basically an alignment. So that preparation in the classroom and that preparation individually as individuals, I think, is important to ensure that we do get some of those pathways to what corporate America has to offer. Is that correct? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, remember this, Dr. Jackson, you can also create your own companies.
Right.
Okay,
yes.
Remember this. Okay, so, I've been here and I was kind of an architect of what we did in Austin. Okay. So from our efforts came companies that you would know, like National Instruments, right? Right out of UT, Dell Computers, right? Whole Foods, right? Evolutionary Technologies, right? So you can have economic development as a three-legged stool, right? You can have companies to come in and you can scale them. You can place people in companies, but you can also start your own companies, right? And there's absolutely no reason why, you can't have a program where you have, the whole emphasis for selected students on actually starting their own companies. So what we call corporate America, I remember when Dell Computers was one person. I remember when John Mack at Whole Foods was two people, right? I remember when National Instruments, I remember when Herb Kelleher was three people. I love Herb Kelleher because they gave me $10 million for my entrepreneurship society, at the university. So there's also this thing that you can also start your own company. You got to be a visionary. You got to think broad. Right.
So Dr. Butler, just one more interjection here. That sounds good. I'm certainly an entrepreneur by nature as well, and certainly a visionary. But typically, what's that profile for someone who wants to start an organization, start their own company? And then typically, what's the success rate for individuals who do that? I think that's great. And I'm certainly not going to be a Debbie Downer in that, or throw a red blanket on the construct of starting your own business. But I do think that people have to have a level of realism in making sure that that's the best fit for them. That's a different skill set to be an entrepreneur and to successfully start your own business.
Yeah, well, first off, you got to have an incubation. So I can tell you this, we were running a 92% success rate, but why? Why were we running a 92% success rate? We started with science, okay? We started with business models. So Microsoft is a business, but it's computer science, okay? Southwest Airlines is a business, but it's the science of flight. Kellogg Corn Flakes is a food company, but it's the science of great food, right? And it is a science that changes business models. Okay? So what we did at Texas under Dean Kosmeskis' leadership, if you will, we combined the sciences, right, with the business schools. And what we said was, if we're going to compete with Silicon Valley, we're no Silicon Valley, but we have done extremely good. a 128 in Boston. We have done extremely good. We have to have a combination of science, and we have to create an ecosystem. All right. That ecosystem means that the IP lawyers understand, and they're gonna charge you. It means that the accounting firms understand, and they're not gonna charge you. It means that people in finance understand, and they're not gonna charge you. So what you do, Dr. Jackson, is you incubate. I mean, the whole Austin area is a business incubator for startups. That's how we make our living. I mean, there's more wealth created around startups, and you either scale it or you get it purchased from you. So the profile is someone who understands how to essentially do the networking. And remind you that Michael Dell was 19 when he started Dell Computers. That Gates, Microsoft, was 20. Right, they're all students. That Facebook was what, I don't know, 15, was 18 and 19. They're all college kids. All these great Federal Express, Smith, college kid, right? Google, college kids, right? Facebook, as I mentioned, college kids, right? Apple, college kids. So you don't know what's going to happen when you combine science and technology with business principles. And this is what we did at Texas. And this is what they did at Stanford. This is what we're going to do at Southern University in the future, right? But you got to have a vision, and you got to realize that enterprise would start with combining business principles with science and technology, and then you incubate them. So when you incubate, what you're doing is reduce the risk. All right. So what we do is in Austin, we have what we call serial entrepreneurs. They start companies, but they could never run them. The failure rate isn't considered failure. It's a learning curve with us, right? We have organized all of the wealthy people. We have the Central Texas Angel Network in Austin. We have the Houston Angel Network in Houston. We have the Baylor Angel Network in Waco. We have the Cowtown Angel Network in Fort Worth. We have the Hill Country Angel Network in Austin, and they're all just wealthy people who will invest in the companies that students tend to start. And Baylor has done a great job with that. Okay. So for example,
so I think the common theme there, Dr. Butler, probably is incubation and mentorship, and having sponsors to help those individuals navigate through the challenges of small business ownership. I mean, just to go on your own perhaps is not the best way to go, because you've not had exposure to it, and it's going to be a rough road, and people get very discouraged when it doesn't work out the first time. So certainly that mentorship, that support, those sponsors really, to the large degree, will do the heavy lifting for those individuals, correct?
You never ever go on your own. I mean, in my area of tech transfer, you just don't do that. Okay. If you look at the structures, I don't know if I can get it up here. I quit sharing. I might share again. Let me see if I can get it real fast.
Dean Andrews, you had a question?
I want to say that this stuff is not easy. I mean, you can't be a failure and be successful at this kind of operation. What did Thomas Edison say? He tried this filament maybe 1 million times. And what did he say about the many times he failed? Well, at least I found one way that won't work. So I'm going to keep looking.
Yes, sir.
Let me see if I can find, I don't know if I can find it, but real fast, since as they say, since we're talking about it there, I'm just going to go to mine and see if I can find Gibson. I don't know if I can find it. Let me see. Sustaining the technocracy here. Okay, I guess I need to share here. What I need to share here? I need to share again?
Yes, sir.
All right, I just tell you what we did, and it was very interesting, but we were very successful. Let me see if we can do this. All right, everybody's got it here? And then now remember, everybody's got that Sustaining Technopolis, right?
Yes, sir, you up.
The case of Austin. So what we did with the university, I'm gonna go down here to a page that kind of explains it all. And what the university did, this is what we did, right? And this is right here. Oh, get away. Okay, what do we do here? Okay, this is what we did, right? And this is all the university, okay? So we started in the 70s, right? I was director of IC Square, not then, but I was director. We started the first business plan competition of any university, all right? We created a chair of free enterprise in technology entrepreneurship, Okay. We started to have conferences, right? Then we created in 92 the Macombs Entrepreneur Society and Austin Entrepreneurial Council. And then we did a massive science and technology commercialization. That is how to take science and technology and create business out of it, right? And then we did the Center for Innovation. So let me go down. And then I started the Herb Kelleher. Where is it? Oh, I started the Herb Kelleher Center, right, for Entrepreneurship. We did the Austin Technology Incubator. And our students did great things. But all of this is incubation levels that we did. Okay. We have an entrepreneur in residence, right? We have a Longhorn startup camp where the students just come and just for 3 days to start companies. We did that, right? We have a 3-day startup with the Austin Technology Incubator and Biosciences. So we got to bring all of this stuff together and say, look, well, you know, how do we do this? Okay, so Dale came out of here, right? IC Square, that you would know. Whole Foods, John Mackey was sort of on the hippie side. He was a philosophy major. He really didn't come out of here, but Cosmetica certainly helped him along, right? So we got the Office of Technology and Licensing, all right? We created a software. The university did all of this now, all right? So when the university did all of this, things began to happen. As simple as that. Now, all right. So if we're looking at what we did, and of course we've written all this up because we do the research, right? And then we just ask a question, let it roll, because students do great things when they introduce, right? Now, but here's the deal: every student won't do it, you know. And what precipitated this was that when Dale wanted to do Dell Computers, we had nothing in the university to help him along, right? Nothing. So all of these structures were set up, right, to help entrepreneurs along. And then what we say, what? So as a result, what happens is that, I don't know if I can find this paper. Let me see. What happened is we I don't know, what am I doing here? It's called networking. It's called, you know, I can't remember my own papers. It's this paper right here. Can you guys see this paper right here? You got
Yes,
that?
sir. Yes, sir.
So this is my later research, because I put what we did in the mathematical formulas. Okay. So what I said, what, you know, Austin is a monster now. So we want to know, you know, I just put it in kind of plain words that what I did here. I got to, you know, I kind of speak in formulas from now and then, right? So what I said, I want to know is this right here, all right? I want to know, this is the person, okay, D is the person who started a job, a company in Austin, Texas, and we want to know, how can we drive entrepreneurs to Austin, Texas? And let me get down here to the to what we're talking about here, all right? So this is where entrepreneurs plan to start their startup. This is 80 to 24, and we're competing with San Francisco, but everybody's coming here. We're doing a good job. So I asked this question: why would you go to Nashville if you want to be a country western singer? Why would you go to LA if you want to be a movie star? Why would you go to New York if you want to be an opera singer? Because the ecosystem is set up, right? And so what happens then is that you know, we look at all this stuff and we compare ourselves with you know, with lots of stuff. And let me go back up here. And so I can tell you this right now: as long as we can move entrepreneurs to Austin, you know, we're gonna be fine. When entrepreneurs stop coming to Austin and starting their companies, then, you know, we're dead, right? So when you do all this kind of, you know, what's my formula? I can't even find my formula, Dean. What's my formula?
Don't worry about it. Go ahead and talk to it.
So when we do all of this research, right? When we do all of this research, right? Then I can make, you know, I'll do a lot of of entrepreneur development with the state, and also with the state of Louisiana too, I might add. But we're not to a point in Louisiana where we have this ecosystem built, right? And what we're finding is this, right? That it's all based on kind of the networking. So here's a good one right here, right? This is an individual, right? Right. The time period and consideration and where that J is going to locate, which is here, by an individual. And this is the observed number of times an individual is having that location. What we're saying is that the networking here is so strong to bring individuals to Austin. So, you know, we do the research, we do all of this stuff, and then we come to a policy of what the hell do we need to do? Well, we're going to network. We probably have a networking event for entrepreneurs before the pandemic, right? You know, every night in Austin, Texas. I cannot go to a Starbucks and sit down and drink coffee without people walking up to me and say, Dr. Butler, I have a startup. And they coming from all over the damn world, right, to start their companies here. It's the same reason why I go to Nashville, right, if I want to be a country western singer. I go to LA if I want to be a movie star. Because we have set up the infrastructure here for it to do well. Any other questions?
Well, just a comment, Dr. Butler, Jeffrey Thomas again, that
Hey,
to
Jeffrey,
build
how you
that
doing?
infrastructure, I'm doing pretty good. To build that infrastructure takes a whole lot of money. And, you know, we have an infrastructure probably in Louisiana for Mardi Gras and gambling, but it's a different type of infrastructure you need for the startups, a different kind of money structure you need. And I'm not sure if we have that here, even though we think we have it in Shreveport. I'm not sure if we really have it.
I'm gonna tell you what we have in Louisiana, because I'm from Louisiana. We got a lot of wealthy families that's not investing in their kids. Okay. Because people believe that if you're not family, they're not going to invest in you. Okay. And for complete transparency, Dean, I come from one of those families. Right? I don't know if I said it right. I was born with 10 silver spoons in my mouth and love it, right? But my point is, what do you need? You don't need, look, let me tell you something. Once we got this started, there's all kind of money in Washington, D.C. for startups, all right? So I have a friend who's president, Dean Andrews got on me because I got a friend who's president of Southern University, Shreveport, right? And I got that friend $800,000 to do what he wanted to do. But because I tell you what, everything we've done, I mean, the federal money and the research money is just off the scale. Just off the scale. So if you start to do something, I mean, people are gonna run to you. So you can start, certainly if you can start anything, right? You can start anything. If you can do a Mardi Gras, then you can switch it. All right, so we had something called South by Southwest, okay? South by Southwest started off because the university at that time was a university town. All the students left and there was nothing to do. So we started South by Southwest. Craig Nip started South by Southwest for just bands coming to play. Now it's the biggest damn thing in the world because it is a technology gathering place. I mean, Twitter was launched here and it evolved from bad music and bands, right? I mean, bad music, right? I mean, horrible music, right? To what it is today. It's one of the biggest things in America today, but it's based on technology and wealth creation. And we have all kind of interactive stuff. People come here to launch companies. And that was started by two people who just wanted, you know, but we switched it from just bands to technology. So I would say, if you want to do something, then you can do an incubator. And we're going to do an incubator. And I think that you get it going by, you know, institutional structure. And there's all kinds of things that you can do. And if you have just one win, all you need is one win, right? You know, a win in the technology space. So Brandon, whom I carried into the Hall of Fame, what is it? The Distinguished Alumni Hall of Fame. He did a company called Walk-Ons. I think it's called walk-ons. He got a C in his class, right? But I think it's a number one. What is it? A sports bar or something?
Yes, sir. It is. It's
a sports bar, right? Well, you know, he kind of did that. He did that because he wanted to do that. But we do stuff. I'm talking about Louisiana now, but not in the technology-based side. You know, and that's just a matter of choosing basically what you want to do. Now, you got to remember, Austin was way, way behind Baton Rouge in the 1980s, right? Baton Rouge had 2 universities. It had the Mississippi River, right? It had oil and gas. It had great, and Austin was nothing, zero, nano. I wish I could find the video because they came over here and interviewed me. Baton Rouge was so ahead of Austin, right? But again, the entrepreneurial leadership, it switched it. I mean, Austin now is a big time entrepreneur wealth creation city. They got a lot of problems now, you know, a lot of this stuff that's going on in terms of what should Austin be. We used to concentrate on opportunities, right? So just take a different kind of leadership. And I don't know if I can find the video. I probably couldn't, but there's a video somewhere that basically talks about that. And Dr. Jackson, I'll try to get it to you. You know, I don't think I can find it. Let me see, Austin. Let me see if I type in Baton Rouge, it might pop up. I don't know.
Well, you know, we in Baton Rouge are always comparing ourselves to Austin and reminiscing about how Baton Rouge was way ahead of Austin back in the 70s and 80s.
But it was.
Yeah.
It was. I mean, it was. I mean, when I got to Austin, it was like, whoa, it had a university, that was it. And the leadership, we got together and it was the students who changed it. We just provided
you had a former U.S. president at LBJ, and you had individuals who had been to Washington who basically probably knew that things had to change in Texas.
Well, yeah, what happened was that Connolly, who was shot in the Kennedy assassination, he was governor. He came and he said, let me tell y'all something. If you guys don't get it together, all the money is going to the East Coast, Chicago, Northwestern, and Stanford. And that's when we changed. I mean, you know, and I've talked, you know, we talk all the time about what we've done in Austin and with the leadership. But, you know, you have to have leaders who basically can think about it. It's the entrepreneurs that's the heroes. And we have we just have a different culture.
Yeah,
so
politics,
yes, sir.
Hero.
I'm listening.
So Dr. Butler, Dr. Jones has a question in the chat around kind of that infamous brain drain when our college students graduate, they leave the state of Louisiana. So she's asking the question about your views on why Louisiana falls behind by not being known for creating strong ecosystems. So what's the narrative here?
Well,
what's
we
the
had
story?
The same, in my papers, we talk about that. We had the exact same thing. We lost all of our best and brightest to California and to New York and to Dallas and Houston. You know, I mean, you know, when you think about Houston's got, and Dallas, it's all corporate America. You know, think about Austin, we don't have many corporate Americans because we startups here, right? I mean, they're coming in as branches. And the reason why Kosmeskis, he said, we're losing our best and brightest. We got to fight. We really have to fight Silicon Valley and 128 in Boston. And we need to provide opportunities, he said, so my grandkids could work in Austin. And that was the incentive that we changed, right? And we had basic meetings. Let me see if I can find because I did a film. Let me see, Revolution. Here we go. Can y'all see this right here? Can you guys see this?
So you need to stop sharing the other one, Dr. Butler.
Okay. I'm not sharing the right one, right?
No, sir. So stop sharing the one that you were sharing. Yeah.
Okay.
And then reshare.
Programs that further the understanding
let me see if I can do
entrepreneur.
All right. What do I have to do now? I have to stop sharing?
Yes, sir. And reshare.
Okay, let me see. I got to find out. What did that thing go? It just popped up.
This technology, right? You're doing a fantastic job.
All right.
You're doing a great job.
Let me get rid of this, right? And get rid of this, right? Oh,
Absolutely fantastic.
okay. Now let me do this, and I'm going to share. But I've got to get it up here, right? I've got to get. Let me see. Revolution. Do I share first? Let me see.
Well, pull it up, then share.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to share this right here. If I can do this. Oh, it went away. Okay. And then I'm going to share this screen, I guess. My golf course. And I'm going to do this, but I got to pull it up. So now, can you guys see that screen?
Yes, sir.
Now let's hope that it comes up on this screen because I got about 50 screens.
You're doing a great job.
Can you guys see this? Okay.
Yes, pull it up.
Can you see it now?
Share the screen so we can see it.
Oh, I didn't share it.
So you actually have to share the video itself.
Okay, all right, hold on. I'm coming. Hold on. We're going to do it again.
The entrepreneurial revolution is made possible by a grant from the Ewing Marion.
All right, we're going to do it again. So I need to get, I'm sharing the wrong screen. I didn't share it. Okay. No problem. We're going to get rid of this right here. I have to share the right screen.
We hear it. It's just not shared.
Well, I think it's shared, but I've got it on the wrong screen.
Okay.
All right, but it's all right. It's coming. Yeah, can y'all hold on?
Yes, sir. Go right ahead.
I'm trying.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Okay. All right, I'm going to let me see. Where's my screen? I need to share.
What, Lorena? Okay, I got you.
You got me? All right, I'm sharing the screen now, right? Good. Now what I have to do is make sure it's the correct screen. Can I stop sharing here?
Yes, sir, you sure can. There you go. Stop sharing.
Now what I'm going to do, I want to share.
Does he need to start the video and then share it?
Not necessarily.
But I need to share the right screen. I think I'm going to share this screen, right?
Okay.
And then we're going to see if it works here. I don't know.
Then pull up the video.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing here. There it is, right there.
Okay, there you go. Perfect. Okay. Yes, sir. It's coming up.
All right. I did $50,000. Kaufman Foundation. This is like 1981 and 91, right? Here we go.
The entrepreneurial revolution is made possible by a grant from the Ewing Marion Kaufman Foundation. Proud to support programs that further the understanding of entrepreneurial activity in America.
Austin, Texas belongs to a growing family of communities where entrepreneurial ventures have played a major role in revitalizing local economies. Austin has risen quickly in national business consciousness as an effective greenhouse for high-tech, high-growth entrepreneurship. What does this community have to offer the high-tech entrepreneur? Part of the answer is historical.
We began 25 years ago in to get major branch plants of key companies like IBM and Texas Instruments and 3M and Advanced Micro Devices and Motorola. In the early 80s, we began to get not only branch manufacturing operations, but also research and development facilities, again for 3M. Both Sematech and MCC, two national consortia, chose Austin as their U.S. headquarters and do major research here today.
10 minutes.
We saw the research arm of the University of Texas grow substantially. And now we're seeing the third phase, which is that we have that critical mass of technology companies here now spinning out lots of entrepreneurs, especially in the technology area.
Austin's preeminent example of successful entrepreneurship is Dell Computer. Michael Dell began his business as a freshman at the University of Texas 12 years ago.
It's an old
His
video.
uncomplicated business model generated growth of 70 to 80% a year for 7 straight years. The company has been growing at 40 to 50% annually and projects revenues this year of $7 billion.
Thank you for calling Dell. This is Lizette. How may I help you?
The environment in Austin, I think, is conducive to companies like Dell growing. The easy access to the university and the graduates every year. I mean, that's just a natural resource. It's a town that's very conducive to high tech.
If Austin has helped Dell grow, it has also benefited from its success. The company employs 6,000 people in the Austin area
and now
enriches the
employs
community in a variety of other
80,000?
ways, including municipal taxes and the Dell Foundation.
Part of the beauty of Austin is that over the years, the business community that we've had here has been one that's really made that extra effort to see that they're participating, supporting, and helping the community and being a part of this partnership that's helped make our city so great. So I think we really have an obligation in the next few years from the public sector, from our institutions of higher education, and certainly from the chamber to reach out to those companies and show them how to get involved, how to grow, how to be a better part of the community. And Dell Computers is a good example of that. When Michael started, he didn't have a foundation, and he really didn't think very much about what ought to be his obligation to the symphony and to the fine arts and to charities, et cetera. And yet today now the company's formed a foundation. They're intensively involved in lots of worthy endeavors in the community because they've reached that point as a corporation where that becomes a part of what they need to do.
The biggest issue we face, which every young company faces almost in perpetuity, is finding very talented people who can keep pace with the tremendous growth, and also putting the infrastructure in place. How do you prepare as a $500 million business to be a $2 billion or a $5 billion business? You really have to put a lot of focus on putting the infrastructure in place now to prepare for the growth.
The recurrent theme in Austin's success story is the effectiveness of a community-wide effort in which city and county government work together with the Chamber of Commerce, the university, and the private sector to create an entrepreneurial environment.
There is a wonderful sense of community spirit here in helping to grow the economy. It's an effort that's grown really over many years, but particularly in the last 8 or 10 years, enhanced by a very strong commitment out of the University of Texas, especially, but other educational institutions too, to support and work with employers, a willingness of local government to be a part of that partnership effort, and also a willingness to let the chamber and the business community really quarterback that effort through our organization.
I noticed yesterday looking in the local paper that our unemployment rate is 2.9%. That is obviously the envy of the country, but to some extent, as we move to this next level with these companies going public, I think our challenge is going to be making sure Austin stays a place that everyone wants to live and work, not move to some other market, because that flow of companies going up through the entrepreneurial stage into IPO status and then beyond means that we've got to keep Austin a place that fosters those kinds of creative ideas. Otherwise, that well runs dry, and that's something we can't afford to have happen.
To a remarkable degree, Austin's success in nourishing entrepreneurship has been due to the presence and effort of one man, the founder of Teledyne, George Kosmetsky. During his 19-year tenure as dean of the business school at the University of Texas, Kosmetsky brought that institution to national prominence. On retiring, he united the entire community in support of his brainchild, the Austin Technology Incubator.
When you don't have a body of knowledge and when you don't have theory, how do you educate people? Well, you said you had to have a laboratory, or if you will, a clinic like the medical students. And so I said, well, we're going to start a technology incubator, which will be a laboratory for all our graduate students in science, engineering, business, law, liberal arts, you name it, business included. There were individuals at that time talking that Texas and Austin in particular needed to be a technology hub, setting an expectation. George Kosmetsky, by the way, played a central role in setting expectations. He was saying, long before we ever were, that we can be a technology hub in the United States, which was a buoy for the community, that we began to sense that if people are saying it, we can meet those expectations. This is about the only city that has both advanced manufacturing and innovation in one place. So we said, all right, let's start now. Now, we couldn't have picked a worse time to do an experiment. We're in the midst of a recession. It's 1989. Our banks are closing. Companies are being resized. And there was an incubator started by the private sector that lost $9 million in 2 years, and it was folding up. in 1989, we had more unoccupied commercial space in Austin, percentage-wise, than any place else in the United States. Again, that was not something to be proud of. So they gave us 4,000 square foot as an experiment based upon an idea that we had, George Kosmetsky and others had, about working with with government, working with the city and with the county, working with the private sector, philanthropists and others, working with higher education, whether we could all come together to address a large problem in this community.
The notion was that we ran on this shoestring, and it was its goal was to provide the infrastructure and services.
She's from Shreveport, Louisiana, by the way.
Fledgling startup companies that would allow them, just like an incubator with a baby, allow them a better survival rate. And his idea was that, you know, if only 1 out of 10 or 2 out of 10 hits, those successes will more than reward the community for the investment it made.
Dr. Kay Hammer, a former professor of medieval linguistics, is founder and CEO of Evolutionary Technologies International, a software development company whose initial success demonstrates the benefits of Austin's technology incubator.
Now, to give you an idea of the kind of thing they did, in addition to giving you relatively cheap rent and switchboard, they would go to the accounting firms and the legal firms in the city and say, okay, give these guys reduced fees or a certain number of free hours. If, you know, if they succeed, you'll have a very loyal client.
And the most important thing in the incubator was our know-how network, which we call Intangibles. We now have 1,400 experts in any subject you want to talk about, that we get 100 hours pro bono. So when the entrepreneur needs help, which he at the beginning can't afford, it's available to him. It's world class.
So KPMG did our first year's taxes for $500. You can't be any more of a bargain than that. And that's the kind of thing that just gave us the edge. It also, just being in the incubator, because they review so many business plans a year, it gave us a little credibility with the venture people before we went out, because they knew that we had already made one cut.
ETI's software package sells for an average price of $250,000. The 5-year-old company currently serves 120 large organizations and is growing at 50 to 100% a year.
The 3M Corporation has been studied to death, and IBM has been studied to death. We haven't studied the entrepreneurial process and the entrepreneur so that we have a better sense of what causes them to do what they do and put their lives on the line the way they do. And so with our Austin Technology Incubator, with 29 technology-based companies in it, this is our enterprise laboratory where our students come, working with faculty, to take discovery, to have a better understanding in the sense of how these entrepreneurs go about pursuing their endeavors.
If we took the sales of the graduated companies here in Austin, we generated almost $5 million of sales tax. Now, the city has not invested over $200,000 to start the technology incubator. The county invested $60,000, and the chamber has invested $150,000, and $100,000 from private sources. So can you imagine a return on, say, $600,000 to $800,000 of just for the city of $5 million? We would call it exorbitant if this were a private company.
8 out of 10 of the companies leaving the Austin incubator have grown into thriving businesses. The value created and returned to the community in the process is an example of how entrepreneurship can work to vitalize a local economy. Across the country, millions of entrepreneurs are acting on their passion to bring their brainchildren into the world as products and services that consumers want and can really use.
We've made it. We have absolutely made it.
So many are succeeding. And in the process, increasingly, they are contributing to the health and vitality of the economy.
Do I have confidence that I can do it? No, I don't have confidence we can get this far. We just don't like to lose.
In fact, entrepreneurship is the country's most valuable economic asset today and principal source of wealth.
It's just booming.
Clearly, the entrepreneurial revolution is at hand.
Okay, everybody got that? So what that was,
Yes, sir.
what that was, you know, what we've tried to do is to provide a method. And if you go to YouTube, you know, I try to put everything up on YouTube. I don't know how you would get to it. I haven't looked at it so long, but maybe I can get to it. So if you guys are interested in that kind of stuff, let me see if I can, what would it be? Let me see. Oh, I got to stop sharing, right? I need to stop sharing. Are y'all there?
Yes, sir. You stopped sharing already.
I have stopped sharing. Okay. So,
yes, sir.
So if we can do this, because you know we did them all the time because and I have on books some, you know, lessons from Austin, Texas, and I don't know if I can find it. I mean, it's been so long. Let me see. IC Square.
So, Dr. Butler, while you're searching for your video, can I ask a question from Kelly Collins? So, Kelly has a question for you and myself around, she said, how can you and Dr. Butler further create additional leadership and mentoring opportunities for individuals that are interested in finding out information on creating an incubator? She says, it sounds easy, she says, but she knows that it's a large task.
Well, you know, we can do it. I don't think what you need is at the university, you need people from the sciences, because the scientists invent stuff, you know, whether it's biology, whether it's chemistry. And now with Google Patents, you can go get a patent off of Google Patents. And like all the courses I teach is how to create wealth from science and technology. So in my MBA class, I have 1/3 scientists, 1/3 MBA students, and 1/3 other students, whether they're from a law school or whatever it might be. You cannot just teach a class on we have, you know, most of our classes are traditional classes, but you really have to have an institute. All right. So it's much easier to do when you have the university, because it comes part and parcel of the university. Okay. So I think we can do it, and we've been talking about it. And but to do it, you got to have the whole buy-in of the community. Okay. So ours was the IC Square Institute. Okay. And let me share something. Let me see if I can find it here. Let me see if I can.
Okay. You see, my chart is always here, down here.
Yeah, I found something. I just say IC Square. I don't know if the one that's, let me see, let me share this screen. Oh, can everybody see this right here? You know, everybody see that screen right there?
Yeah.
Yes, sir. It's coming up.
It says IC Square. Let me see which one is this. I don't know which one it is.
And it was
so that's let me see, that's K. So it might be from
gold.
Can everybody see her?
Yes.
Okay.
Shoestring.
So let me just do this. We just saw this, but let me make it
goal was
whole
to
here.
provide the infrastructure and services.
So that we just saw that. Let's go. I think this might be the one where we feel. So some of them might be. Yeah, this is different.
It's a place
I think I'm on this one. I'm not sure.
Ideas.
We do so many of them.
A network for the creative thinkers, entrepreneurs, and pioneers of tomorrow. Is it any wonder that sitting at its center is a university whose sole purpose is helping people discover theirs? We're Texas. What starts here changes the world.
At the University of Texas at Austin for 30+ years, the IC Squared Institute has been the mighty confluence of academia, government, and
this is our incubator. I think this is the one I'm on. Yeah, I'm on this one.
Dr. John Sibley Butler is the director of the IC Squared Institute, director of the Herb Kelleher Center for Entrepreneurship, and is the Sam Barshop Centennial Fellow at the IC Squared Institute.
We see ourselves, as the University of Texas does, as a partnership with the people of Texas and this region. And of course, now that the American dream is a global dream, it is a partnership with global aspirations also.
These are all the entrepreneurs
the mission
who
of
did
the IC
$1 million
Squared
companies.
Institute, which stands for innovation, creativity, and capital, is simple yet profound. To combine technology, entrepreneurship, and education to improve the world via wealth creation and prosperity sharing. Dr. William Cunningham is former chancellor of the University of Texas System, former president of UT Austin, former dean of the Graduate School of Business, and holds the Gregory A. Kosmetsky Centennial Fellowship at IC Squared Institute.
I believe IC Squared is central to the development of the University of Texas. Universities need institutes like IC Squared that can bring people together from across the campus.
Dr. Juan Sanchez is the Vice President of Research at the University of Texas at Austin.
Since its beginning 30 years ago, IC Square was a grand experiment at the University of Texas. I personally will declare that the experiment has been very successful. IC Square has really played a key role in transforming the university and the city of Austin. It's been a key element in nurturing the entrepreneurial spirit that you see in our faculty, in our students, and in the community.
If you hosted a meeting of the minds, a place where the right brain dreamers inspired the left brain doers, where would you gather?
In 1977, the IC Squared Institute began as city leaders were initiating a strategy to create a technopolis, competing with Boston and San Jose by attracting high-tech companies such as Tracor, Texas Instruments, IBM, Motorola, and Advanced Micro Devices.
We looked around at the resources locally, and we realized you've got really smart people coming out of our university and education system. We had lots of research going on here, but it wasn't being commercialized in any way. We lacked infrastructure to build businesses, yet by nature, Texans were entrepreneurial. Look at the oil and gas industry itself. And so as a consequence, we felt we had to put a technopolis or a technology-based city together.
As an emerging high-tech center, Austin became the home for numerous successful technology startups.
So this is basically our incubator. That's Mike and George.
The environment in Austin, I think, is conducive.
So I'm gonna stop sharing, Dean. Is that all right?
Like Dell growing.
John, you find this interesting?
And the graduates every year. That's just a natural resource.
All right, because we have. Okay, I'll leave it up.
Beginning, located at the UT Graduate School of Business, under the leadership of its founder, Dr. George Kosmetsky, Dean of the UT Graduate School of Business. The main focus of the IC Squared Institute was the study of capitalism.
When you don't have a body of knowledge and when you don't have theory, how do you educate people?
In the early years, that research involved the BBR, the Bureau of Business Research, founded in 1926, and the work of multidisciplinary IC Squared Institute research fellows and visiting scholars. Dr. Robert A. Peterson is the Deputy Director of the IC Squared Institute, Associate Vice President of Research for the University of Texas at Austin, and holds the IC Squared Institute Charles E. Hurwitz Centennial Fellowship.
The Institute basically is a catalyst for knowledge creation, going beyond the typical institute that you would find in a university or even in the public sector or the private sector. I can't emphasize too much how unique the IC Squared Institute is as an entity.
With the ongoing completion and publication of broad-ranging research, the UT Board of Regents came to Dr. George Kosmetsky, its founder, with a challenge. They told him,
The IC Squared done a marvelous job. It's published 60% of all the literature on how to commercialize science and technology. But what are you doing about it?
How the IC Squared Institute responded was by forming the Austin Software Council, the Capital Network, and ATI, the Austin Technology Incubator.
The notion was that we ran on this shoestring, and it was, goal was to provide the infrastructure and services to small fledgling startup companies that would allow them, just like an incubator with a baby, allow them a better survival rate.
So ATI has had a significant impact since it was first established in 1989. In terms of the metrics that we use to measure ourselves, ATI has worked with over 150 teams of entrepreneurs who are building technology-based businesses. Those teams of entrepreneurs have raised over $750 million in investor capital. We've had 4 IPOs, over 25 significant acquisitions. The companies that are still in operation are generating about $1.5 billion in top line today. And the city of Austin gives ATI member companies credit for having created over 10,000 jobs. In addition, the other part of our impact is the impact that we've had on the University of Texas community. For example, last semester we had 112 students from the University of Texas working with ATI member and pipeline companies.
From ATI grew the Masters of Science program for Science and Technology Commercialization.
Remember that the Institute was never created just to do the egghead research. It was based on thinking and doing.
Throughout the years, the IC² Institute has continued to expand its local, national, and international influence.
All right, that goes to the national stuff. I'm gonna cut it off, okay? All right, it's about a minute left. Okay, so basically,
the IC² Institute family are the Digital Media
you got it?
Collaboratory.
You got it here? Y'all got me back?
The development of interactive.
Yes, sir, you're back. There you go.
Okay, good. So here's the deal.
And the
If I can cut that thing off. So this is kind of what we did, right?
One is to transfer the knowledge.
Let me just do this.
And the practices we've developed.
You got me?
So they have these.
I still hear Sid. I still hear Sid talking.
To
yes, sir. So
go beyond the program. Yeah. And then to look at real business value and helping you.
Oh, I see. It was
create jobs.
No wonder it was special. Okay, so basically that was our incubator. I was the director for 20 years, too long. We created so much wealth, but we did it in different kinds of, I have a book on it. We did it across the world, and it can be done, but the university has to be central at what it does. And as you can see, Dean, all of my professors, we had developed a foundation, and we gave them endowed positions. All right. And so we did a good job. It's over. We changed Austin. We did a great job, and happy to do it. Right. But I think it's a model that can be done. And I think that San Marcos down the street, Texas State is doing a good job. University of Dallas can do better, but they're doing a good job. Rice has done a good job in Houston. So you just have to do that. But I think we can do it. We're going to do it in Baton Rouge, baby. We're going to do it in Baton Rouge. Okay. Oh, any questions? Any other questions? Let's ask some questions here.
Great.
Yes, sir. Dr. Butler, I understand that you voiced interest in starting the business incubator, small business incubator and whatnot in Baton Rouge, as well as in Shreveport, Louisiana. However, I understand from some of the constituents that are here with us this evening that some have voiced interest in being able to have a future business opportunity or with yourself and Dr. Jackson. However, I would like to, I believe it was our last commentator that spoke about that in combination, the young lady. So I would like to see, it's falling short of that. Is there some way with you all, with Southern Law Center, you, Dr. Butler, being able to have an opportunity to have a future inlet as far as hearing you speak about certain things, your ideals that would be open to the general public in some way?
We did. I have worked, we put it in Shreveport, believe it or not. So I have a good friend in Shreveport by the name of John George. And somebody told me about the incubator. Only thing I knew when he introduced me as playing trumpet, which I didn't play. But anyway, we put an incubator in Shreveport, and we raised the initial excuse me, I think it was like 1.5 million for investments. So we've done it in Shreveport. If you go to YouTube, all right, since we got you here, you guys got me thinking about this stuff. I have to see if I can find it right. If you go to YouTube, I did a talk in Louisiana. Let me see. I got to find it again. I have never really seen it, but I have heard about it. Let me see, John.
So, Dr. Butler, while you're searching for your video there, so you alluded to earlier that potentially that if we were to look at an incubator here in Baton Rouge, that you recommend that it's around the technology space. Is that correct?
Well,
Yeah.
let me say this for you.
And we don't want to call it small business, because small business can become big business. We want to become more of a we can do anything we want to. We can do a technology-based kind of deal, right?
Dean Andrews, you want to say something?
There are some resources here. Maybe, a lot of students may not be aware of, but there's a Louisiana Technology Park. There's the Technology Incubator out at LSU. There's also the Patent and Entrepreneurship Program over in the Law Center. There's also the incubator that's over in the Philanthropy Center. So there are some resources here. It's just a matter of getting in contact with individuals and moving forward to see more or less what resources that you need. Back in late 1990s with Governor Foster, he had Louisiana 2020, and he put together some resources that went to LSU, went to Louisiana Tech, and some portion of it went to Southern University to try to become Silicon Valley.
I remember that, because remember, I had Baton Rouge to Austin. I had people from Baton Rouge to come to Austin, right? And I do remember that. I did find a YouTube for Miss Collins on, I think I found a speech, and I laid everything out, and we did a good job in Shreveport. And by the way, there's a guy by the name of Dexter Blanche up there in Shreveport, and he's doing a good job. He has a technology-based company, and you know that when you do this thing, for example, I'm working with a venture firm, SoftBank. They got $100 million for Black entrepreneurs, $100 million, right? And then there's another guy I'm working with that's 80 million. They're from LA, and they're from companies in Louisiana. Okay, so if you want to see how we did that, and what we did, I could show you the Miss Collins. Let me see if I can show you that. I don't know if I can show you that. Let me see if I can show you that.
You can give me the name of it, Mr. Butler. I'll watch it. I'm definitely interested in it.
What I'm looking for right now. Can you see this right here? No, I got to share, right?
Yes, sir. You got to share.
Okay.
You're doing great. You're doing great.
Am I doing good?
Yes, sir.
Good?
Yes, sir.
Let me see. We gotta do this. And we gotta go over here. I gotta see. We're gonna have to do this.
So we also have a comment in the chat that the Southern University Ag Center is establishing a food incubator, which will need the collaboration of business school and law center as well. So some of those collaborations are already starting. So we definitely want to pay attention to that as well. Right. Thank you, SU Ag Center.
Yeah, can you see this right here?
Yeah, we see it.
That video right here?
Yes.
Okay, so this is a friend of mine, and we launched this thing in Shreveport. And I don't know what he's going to see. I have not seen this thing, but he had me doing all kind of stuff I didn't do. Here we go. Can you guys see that?
Really, is to introduce our speaker.
And I can do this in Baton Rouge.
John Butler has been a friend of mine for a while. As I was on the LSU Board of Supervisors, he is probably one of the biggest LSU fans that I know.
Not this year.
I heard him sitting there talking about economic development. And I always thought that John was just sort of a ex-band guy. He was the first African-American trumpet player.
I did not play the trumpet.
And Charlie Roberts and him would go to town after every game and Lod Cook. And then one day I heard him talking about economic development. and it sounded like he had been taping my morning meditation sessions, because everything
We're
he
not
was
gonna listen to
saying
this,
was
Dean,
everything that I
but
had
that's
been
it. I'm
thinking
glad I
over the
found it.
years that we needed to do in Shreveport. So I grabbed him and I said, you know, John, you don't know me very well, but would you spend about 10 minutes with me in the boardroom here? And so he did, and he downloaded to me everything that I had ever wished for, finding somebody that would know all the details about how to start and nourish an economic development program that catered to the entrepreneur. You know, the city, every city, to have a good economic development needs, you know, three things. They need to recruit, and that's what we've been doing.
All right, I'm gonna stop sharing now that we
last,
found it, okay?
You know, 50
and then we'll talk
years
about
is
it.
recruiting big
All right.
companies to come into town, and that's really what government
So
has
this is
been
different.
focused on. And so that's the number. You know, I still think that that's the number.
It's still playing, Dr. Yeah. So
So
we
what
had a
we can do is to
recommendation.
answer a question. That's on YouTube. I will send that to you. I've been around the world kind of doing this. I've got books on this. I know that Louisiana can do this. I got one from Wiley. Good evening. I found that video amongst others. Good. See, I got a lot of good research assistants here, right? So I think that we can do that. But here's the deal. You know, I think that Southern University can do it. Yeah, we have an incubator that's run by a friend of mine at LSU. But it's not a high-tech incubator, and they haven't produced the kind of Dales or whatever, you know. They've done a good job in teaching students. But you know what we really want to do is really kind of get it going. And I really think that the university has to be the catalyst, because remember, it's the kids, like I say, who have never been burned before, right? So they've had the experience. It's kind of like, you know, when I was a kid, I would drive across Lake Pontchartrain. It was one lane going 100 miles an hour. Now I'm scared to go. I'm scared to drive over it. You know, you get kind of interesting, right? So I do believe that it can start, but I think it can be done in Baton Rouge, and I think you can do it. And I think Shreveport provides an excellent model. They have done. We launched that thing. I went over there about 5 or 6 times, and we're working with incubators, and we're launching companies, but more importantly, they're investing in companies. So we have the Angel Network in Shreveport. New Orleans was not as successful. We tried to do it in New Orleans, but it was not successful. But Shreveport is doing a good job.
Excellent. So what's some recommendations, Dr. Butler, in terms of providing some actionable next steps for this process so that people can leave with some takeaways? So what are our big takeaways for tonight? Is this maybe a follow-up session at some point in time, and we can get in the weeds and dive deeper into the weeds on how do we execute the action plan and the action steps? Would that be perhaps one takeaway? What are your recommendations? I'm leaning to your expertise at this point.
Well, what I've tried to do here is to get people to think about things differently in a different way. And I've tried to say that whether it's entrepreneurship, you got to have leadership. And we took the military as a model. Okay. And I think what you do is, you know, we kind of copied Silicon Valley when we did ours, right? But we were just very, very successful. We look back on it and we said, wow, you know, look what happened. And I measure it not only by those companies, but all the spin-outs, all the people who are moving here, right? So I would suggest that the university get together, you know, and do a white paper on what you want to do. I think we get with the leadership in Washington for funding in Louisiana, whoever the senators and the congressmen are, and start talking about getting direct funding, you know, to fund such an institute like the IC Square Institute. And I think we can do that, you know, by networking. I probably know everybody, you know, given that I'm on the foundation board, work with, you know, interested people like John Kennedy from, you know, over by Covington, who is there and his aide. And I know the governor very, very well from AMIT, and I know Toy Taylor very, very well. I know Richard, who was head of the economic development, for Louisiana in the governor's office. But I don't think putting together funding would be a problem. Because remember, the country has no matter what happened, the country has to go on. But it's a community effort. It's it's a community effort. You get industry, you get government, you get the university to provide the entrepreneurs. And then I think you put it together, and you got to have the funding going forward, right? And you got to remember, if you are set up, I know Texas does $800 million in basic research funding a year. Now we're a big university, right? I know LSU has dropped from 500 million to about 200 million, which has got to be improved, right? But point is that, it definitely, it can be done. So I think the next step is lay your vision out, look around the country for best practices, put entrepreneurial leadership and organizational leadership at the very, very head, stuff that we've talked about. And then, hit the pavement for funding. You can ask for funding from DC, but they really, to me, really support innovation and entrepreneurship. The other was on the foundation. The Kauffman Foundation has spent so much money on these kind of things. They are a foundation that really, really fund stuff. So I think you can do that, and we can begin to search for funding. I'd be happy after the pandemic is over, right? After the pandemic is over, I'll be happy to come to Baton Rouge and talk more about that. We can do it virtually, but I'll be happy to come home. I was coming home this weekend, but like the COVID is going to kill the Alabama game, which might be a good thing.
Perhaps, right?
Well, we could be divorced 4 touchdowns. But anyway, I'll be happy to come home, more than happy to come home and talk about that. Because, the thing about it is when you've seen something done, okay, and you look at a canvas, and I can tell you this, if you look at Baton Rouge, it's just waiting to explode, I think. And I think that's true of Southern University in so many different areas, rather what we're talking about now in other areas. I think that Xavier has exploded in a lot of different ways. They're doing a lot of great things at Xavier, and I think that Louisiana Lafayette, what's that school called now? It used to be USL. Is that Louisiana Lafayette? I think they're doing a lot of good stuff also. And so I think that, you put the vision together, put it on paper, and it's a partnership between government, industry, and business. And the deal is to create wealth in the state and move from there. And we can use that model, right?
Excellent.
Okay, Dr. Butler, we want to give you a great round of applause. I think you've done a great job here tonight. And we thank you for going the extra mile to provide us all this information in terms of the intersection of entrepreneurship and leadership.
I appreciate it. I enjoy speaking to my mother's alma mater and my father's alma mater. And, I like doing that. And, but I think universities can be at the center of all of this, but, you got to have different stools. And, you might have just, 3 faculty involved. You might have just 6 students involved at the beginning. But I think there's a way to get that, what do they say, give me that good old Jaguar feeling. I think you can get that good old Jaguar feeling around entrepreneurship. Right.
So we're going to ask everyone to unmute themselves at this point and just tell Dr. Butler how much we appreciate him for just sharing this impactful information. Go ahead and do that for us. Let's just thank him for what he's done for us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Butler.
Thank you, Dr. Butler.
Thank you, Dr. Butler.
Okay, you're welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Butler.
Thank you, Dr. Butler.
Thank you, Dr. Butler.
Very grateful for this class, Dr. Butler. Thank you very much.
Grateful to be here.
So it's great, Dr. Butler, when you hear it from the registrants. You know, we can see it in the chat, but when you audibly hear it, I think that really resonates with the impactful work that you've done and how you've just kind of led the charge and just unpacked some very valuable information. You just a wealth of information, a lot of experiences, a lot of exposure, and we just cannot say enough how much we appreciate all of the resources that you've shared, all of the time that you've shared, and you've definitely gone above and beyond tonight, and you certainly did an impactful job. We're going to go ahead and let Dean Andrews have some final words before we go tonight.
Yeah, I'd just like to thank Dr. Butler. As I said, I first met John back in 1995 at Tennessee State when we were part of the HBC Nissan Fellowship Program. And we've brought him back from time to time to speak at various programs and projects. And he's always been very impactful. He's always more or less talked about how he can share his knowledge and his information with others in terms of understanding how basically we can move forward with self-help and how we don't have to be dependent, but basically can go out in the spirit of Booker T. Washington in terms of self-help and in terms of creating that next generation of entrepreneurs as far as leadership and as far as work is concerned. I guess the other thing I would like to challenge Dr. Jackson. I know all of you guys are already leaders, but I wish it was some way we could capture information from you. So I would suggest to Dr. Jackson if he could ask you guys to participate in a session next week just solely for the students in this program, just to give us your feedback as to how we may be able to continue this process. We have our EDA grant, and we're thinking of developing another program for next semester. So if you can come back with us at, say, 6 o'clock on Monday of next week, we won't keep you this long, but basically give us some feedback in terms of what you think was accomplished in this particular program. So I'll challenge Dr. Jackson to try to make that happen.
Yes, sir. We're definitely open to that. And perhaps anyone else that would like to have that final session, all of the registrants, you want to come back and just give us some real-time feedback. One of the next steps is that we'll be sending out a survey to you so that you can give us some feedback about the program. Again, this was an inaugural session. We probably got it up to speed in about 3 weeks because the Board of Supervisors approved the Strategic Leader Institute. So we've had just some tremendous people that have done a lot of heavy lifting for us. Again, we want to thank the Board of Supervisors for all that they've done to help get this Strategic Leadership Institute enacted. We certainly want to thank Chancellor John Pierre and his staff for helping us to get this off the ground and to really create this learning leadership space. Professor Dickerson, Mr. Hunter, and all of them within the Southern University Law Center. Again, to Dean Andrews, our dean, that's really a huge entrepreneur. It's very smart, man. I love talking to Dean. He really challenges us to be our best and certainly wants what's best for our students and the College of Business. And to Dr. Neglect, to Dean Ash over the graduate school. We appreciate Dean Ash for being a heavy lifter in this process as well. And then last but not least, to this inaugural cohort of leadership learners, we could not have done this without you all. We really appreciate your just being here and understanding and showing up every Monday. So we're going to challenge you, as Dean said, one more week. Just come back. Let's have kind of a roundtable discussion about next steps and how we can improve, how we can make this better, because we certainly know that, as John Maxwell says, everything rises and it falls on leadership. And it takes a leader to know a leader, to grow a leader, to show a leader. We look forward to working with our leaders in the future.
I think you've had excellent presenters, Ambassador Joseph Joe Honore and Dr. John Sibley Butler. So I don't think you could have had a better selection of individuals in this program. So I'm really elated that they all accepted our invitation. And we strategically planned this because we knew that John would be our cleanup hitter and would basically knock it down.
Well, as you say, I'm always happy to be with the Jaguars, and I'll say, go Jaguars and go Tigers. And I'm looking forward to working with everyone. And I think you can do great things in Baton Rouge and the state of Louisiana.
Great. We appreciate that. Go ahead, Dean, please.
I'll turn it back to you, John. Ronald, go ahead and close us out.
Okay, well, great. Thanks, everybody. We appreciate you folks. We'll be getting that link out. So to everyone that wants to come back next week and just kind of have that roundtable discussion to really close it out. And again, Dr. Butler, impactful job, sir. We appreciate you. We appreciate the gifts that's on the inside of you. And we want you to continue to grow and continue to serve others. Have a great night, everyone. We'll see you guys back next Monday. If you'll be joining us at 6 o'clock, that link will be coming.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Good night.
Have a great night, folks.
Thank you.
Good
night.
Everyone have a good night.
Thank you, Dr. Jackson. Good night.
Thank you, folks. Have a great night, folks.
Hey, Dr. Jackson, I have a quick question.
Yes.
The level 5, was there a level 5 class that you guys had offered?
So, Philip, no, we didn't do a level 5 class. So that will be part of our framework for some of our future leadership opportunities. And we'll discuss that next week in next week's session about what the next steps will be for the Strategic Leadership Institute. We certainly have a roadmap. We have a plan, and we'll unpack that next week.
Okay. I just don't want to miss anything.
No problem. Thanks for inquiring. We definitely want you involved in the process.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Jackson. I appreciate it. You have a great rest of the night.
You too, sir.
All right, bye-bye.
All right. Thanks, folks. Y'all have a great night. Enjoy it, everyone.